So I think we've seen a bunch of videos on social media this week from Gaza, right? The guys like popping out of tunnels and chucking bombs onto tanks and then shooting them with like an RPG. Just incredible stuff to see. Tim, you shared that video of someone pretending to be a nurse from Al Shifa Hospital, right?
Yeah, it was
Which was just like
yeah,
bizarre.
it was a woman speaking directly into the camera. You can only see a little bit behind her, but it seems vaguely hospital-like. And
Yeah, which I
yeah,
guess is all she really needed.
and she's speaking in the like the I guess like the affectation of a Hebrew speaker, mispronouncing Arabic syllables,
Yeah.
all this kind of thing.
Yeah, like the community notes on it was like you can tell that she's Israeli because of her accent, and also she can't pronounce any of these sounds.
Yeah. And
Which like I appreciated like the sassiness of like community notes after like specifically Osint guys have been so shit so far in the
yeah,
conflict. Like and have been
the
laundering so much Israeli propaganda.
and it's funny because they were like there were people that were actually at the hospital that just spread the video around and were like, does anybody recognize her? And people were like, no, like I've worked there for 16 years. She's talking
Yeah.
about like, she was talking about like treating children. So she would be in my department and I've never seen this person, like even like
Yeah.
her stethoscope is wrong. That's not the kind of thing that we use,
Yeah,
just things like this. And it's like this idea that there is like these people like that people aren't there, that we
yeah.
can't contact, we can't just be like, hey, look,
I just
it's
have to
a
imagine like the Zionist side of this, like looking through social media and seeing like so much fake shit that people are calling fake and calling out as fake constantly,
mm,
then you also you see like posts like them claiming that the like videos of injured children are fake, but it's
yeah,
that itself is a fake because they're posting like from behind the scenes from a short film about Gaza. And then like you're just like, damn, why are all posts fake now? I guess
yeah,
there's lots of propaganda on both sides.
yeah.
But like the Al Shifa video, like so my girlfriend had a call with some third party HR thing that's like basically she's got time off work for like mental health reasons and like um the HR service was this guy who looked about 12 who was on like a green screen in front of like a simulated environment that's like supposed to look a bit like a clinic or whatever, and
Yeah,
like it was just one of the bizarrest things. It was completely useless, and it's just like, can we help with any of these? Maybe we can. Could we reduce the number of emails you do or whatever? And it was just utterly like gibberish and just trying to like
yeah,
tick boxes. But like now I realize that guy was calling from Al Shifa Hospital, and I feel like I got to commend his bravery. Um,
yeah. It's what is it, BetterHelp, the therapy service that
oh
is actually
God,
run by like an Israeli tech company or whatever.
yeah.
They're
Ads for those
notorious
is
for
crazy.
being kind of shitty, especially to Palestinian people that end up on
Hmm.
their calls. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, they're using that same technology to make these videos. Um, no, but yeah, it's terrible. Some of these videos are really like pushing the boundaries of what I would have expected someone to believe. But like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's like you get to
Well,
see how flimsy that barrier is when someone is like really invested in the in the outcome or whatever. Like they've already decided they agree with it before they see the video and they're gonna not really
totally.
interrogate it. It's
One
like the
one of
suspended
the
disbelief. Yeah.
Yeah, like one of the crazy things I saw was so there's some guy who's like just like moving through the immense trauma of like his family members being killed and just being like, I hope that I like die fighting for the freedom of Palestine and this stuff. And then like a bunch of Zionists being like, clearly this guy is a raging anti-Semite and he's exactly the same as the Nazis. Only Hamas is worse than the Nazis because even the SS, you got to hand it to them, didn't love doing what they were doing. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so at any point where we're like handing it to the SS, like what is happening here?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
like
that's like
and then
the
people started
Douglas
sharing
Murray
around
thing, right?
pictures. Yeah, no, exactly, the Douglas Murray stuff. But like people started sharing around pictures of like people from concentration fascists from concentration camps, like taking pictures like on their break, all like chilling and stuff. And I was like, oh, you know what this has the like visual cadence of is like all of the Israeli influencers who are being like, that feeling when we've leveled Gaza and we turn it into a theme park, haha. Like,
yeah,
you
same
can just
shit.
you can just put
Same
these images
shit.
side by side. It's
Yeah.
fucking ridiculous.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah, the theme park thing. Ugh.
Horrible. On that note, welcome to Red Planet. We got a lot of
Yes,
Gaza
okay.
in the news this week, but first I want to ask Mule, what was the most base thing you did this week?
Thank you very much. So basically, the most base thing that I did this week, I'm going to mention that after this because I'm very excited to announce that I'm now a proud cat dad, and I rescued this cat. It's very cute. You can't see him just yet because he's very nervous. He's currently harassing my partner in the other room. So we're gonna maybe next week, if you're watching the show, you'll be able to see little Tom. So that's been very exciting. But I guess rescuing a cat is pretty based. But on top of
I think so.
yeah, on top of that, I've actually been making a lot of progress, surprisingly. With the squat that I've been talking to. And I'm not saying surprisingly because it's a squat. I'm saying surprisingly because we're trying to use our connections with the Greater Manchester Law Centre to try and find a angle to delay the High Court eviction of this squat. And one thing that we found out that we could use to justify delaying the eviction is that they were actually, there's a lot of people in the squat who've been failed or are in the process of not doing very well in the council's homeless system. And so because they're on council land, it could be argued that that is somewhere they should be able to at least stay until they're rehomed. So there's that kind of angle that we're going for. And then what we can do on top of that, I don't know. But that is where we've gotten. So that's been very exciting. I've been coordinating just between them, sort of like liaising between them and the law centre. So that's been really helpful. And yeah, really buzzing about that. That's been like very exciting that hopefully we're going to get this High Court eviction stopped, because anyone who has listened to the show or watched the show, over the last year or so will know any kind of High Court eviction is just extremely violent. Doesn't matter who it is. The police use it as an opportunity to test out, practice arresting people, practice riot tactics and all this kind of stuff. So if we could save them that at least, then we're laughing. And that buys us a bit more time to have a look at other options to try and unfortunately we shouldn't have to do this, like quote unquote legitimize the squat as some kind of community center, but that would be the best thing for us to do in order to help them literally stay living there, keep doing the good things that they're doing. So that's been the most basic thing that I've done this week, aside from like just sort of like generic tenants union stuff as well. But Tim, what about you, my friend?
Well, let's have a look. So, there was another Palestine solidarity rally. It's a lot of syllables, right? A lot of L's and S's and stuff. In Auckland yesterday, it was another big one. Thousands of people, again referred to by most media sources as hundreds or more or something, I think they said, which is kind of ridiculous. I think they did a similar thing in London when they were like it was like more than 10,000, and like the estimate was like way
it was
like
half a million
times that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I mean, technically, right, but yeah, this means it has been the longest like sustained, the biggest and longest sustained protests I like in my memory, like I think perhaps even like of the country, because while we have had huge protests before, really big ones or whatever like that, it's been like every weekend for like like over a month now. So yeah, and yeah, just like, and huge as well, like thousands and thousands of people. So yeah, so that's been good. What else? Yeah, I think that's kind of it. I feel like the whole Israel-Palestine thing has been dominating most of my brain. for the last
Yeah, you and
little
me
while.
both. You and me
Yeah,
So
both.
absolutely.
yeah. So I haven't really had much else kind of going on, but yeah. What about Sophie? What's
Uh, well, I mean, I've had a kind of quiet week. I'd say the most basic thing I've done is I got some new house plants, which like no, I'm hyped about. We
That's a
have like a
huge big up from
mezzanine
me.
level. There's some like ivy we've got coming down off of the balcony. I have not done loads this week. I want to give a massive shout out to Nat. She and a few friends were out at the Palestine Solidarity rally yesterday in central London. It was absolutely huge. It was like over 1 million people. They shut down so much public transport. Like there were 6 different tube lines that were like closed fully or had like partial closures. Buses wouldn't go through anything like the yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot about it. But like I won't just like treat Nat's thing as my base thing. I just want to shout out that she's did something cool while I was otherwise
Yay.
occupied.
Big up
Um,
now.
yeah, exactly. But I will also tell you, going on a roll of telling you other people's base things, I will now also say that we got a write-in from a viewer called Morgana.
Oh,
Oh, that's a good
that's
point.
right. We
I'm
should
getting a note from
also
the
mention.
producer right now that also Kira is away being based right now. That's why she's not here. You know what? I'm gonna go 3 for 3. It's gonna be shout out to Nat, shout out to Kira, shout out to our viewer Morgana as well, who says I went to my first real protest ever and participated in the Block the Boat action at Tacoma, Washington, on the 6th to get in the way and delay shipments of weapons to Israel. So that's fantastic. We want to know what base things
So
you've been
based.
doing. You can message us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. But enough people being based, or in my case, getting some plants. Tim, why don't you tell us about some renters?
Well, so yeah, over in Toronto, in Canada, around 500 tenants spread across multiple properties withholding their rent. Some of them even going back as far as June this year. So most notably is the 33 King Street apartment building, where about 200 tenants have joined together and staged a rent strike. So residents of 33 King Street have reported that some of them who have been there for a long time say that their rents have raised by up to 50% in the past 10 years, um, which is heaps. When some of them are saying that when they moved in, they were paying 1,000, now they're paying 1,500, and these were the affordable, like these were the low cost housing options available for them. And a lot of people are seniors, a lot of people, like uh, just working class, working poor people, that this was the only option available to them. And so, when their landlord says either pay more rent or go somewhere else. For a lot of these people, the option, somewhere else isn't an option. It's like, these places on the street. So, yeah, landlords have initiated eviction proceedings for more than 70 of the residents at 33 King Street and 75 in one of the other buildings over in Thorncliffe Park, and more are likely to come, but the strikers remain resolute. So, without approval from the Landlord and Tenant Board, landlords in Ontario are only allowed to increase rent for most existing tenants according to the province's annual rent increase for inflation. So, this guideline is set at about 2.5% at the moment. But there's AGIs that allow landlords to tack on up to an additional 3% per year for things like significant renovations or repairs. So a lot of these places have just been raising rent every year by the full 5.5% and saying, oh yeah, this is for repairs and renovations. But a lot of these residents are saying there are no repairs or renovations being done, that this is ridiculous. A lot of them, especially in the 33 King Street address, have gone without access to a lot of just like the building facilities, everything from like there's some tenants saying they couldn't access like laundry and things like that, whereas others saying their balconies have been completely shut off and damaged and unusable for years now. Things like this, you know, like, so there's no renovations being done on these already very old and quite, you know, rundown buildings. Definitely not enough to cover this these rent increases. And so and so even though it's only a little, you know, like a couple percentage points, this all stacks up, right? Like, so Charlene Henry, who is the chair of the 33 King Street Tenants Association, said that an increase of a few percentage points can have a significant impact in today's affordability crisis. She says, when I have a working class person just like myself look at me in the elevator at 5 a.m. on the way to work and say, we need to win this because at the end of the month, I choose rent over food, my stomach turns, she said. So, and after a large reduction on an earlier rent increase, because they've staged a series of rent strikes already up to this point. So there was an earlier increase that went through, and they did a rent strike that they managed to bargain it back down, but a bunch of those tenants had already paid in advance, because, you know, that's how typically rent always works. And then the increase was cut, which means that because they pay in advance, the landlord actually owes a lot of the residents money. So they're, you know, it's like they're owed money, but they're still having to pay this rent that is, you know, still increasingly more unaffordable. But the landlords, a company called Dream, say that they actually don't owe anything back because they're planning more rent increases that they expect to already be approved, so that money that they've already been paid in advance, they're not going to pay it back because they're going to make it up down the line anyway, which is truly wretched behavior. If they you know, if they did owe them the money, they should pay them back, and then when those things get approved, they can sort it out then. But hopefully with the ongoing renters strike, those, you know, increases won't get approved, or there'll be some kind of mitigation at some point. But yeah, I guess we'll keep seeing how this develops, because it's building up momentum. Like, so the residents at King Street and one of the other addresses, like I said, they've done multiple smaller rent strikes up to this point, and every time it gets bigger. So every time more people, and even other residents from other buildings around the city, have picked up and been like, well, they're doing it, so we can do it. So yeah, so about 500 tenants across the city at the moment are doing it. We'll keep checking in. It would be amazing to see much wider, you know, a much bigger scale rent strike across most of the city, because yeah, like Charlene Henry said, there is an affordability crisis, and that's not just in Ontario either. That's basically, it seems like every week we're talking about a different city where there's a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, an affordability crisis, you know, the inherent contradictions of capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that one and see how that develops. But Mule, why don't you tell us about what is happening with those trade unions over in India?
Oh, yes. So there has been a bit of news, basically, that people may have seen, where Israel has hired a bunch of people from India, a bunch of workers from India, to go and sort of redevelop Gaza once they are, you know, done flattening it, removing the Gazan people from existence. Just absolutely vile, disgusting shit. However, construction workers from India should not be used to replace Palestinian workers in Israel, said major Indian trade unions in a joint statement issued on Thursday, the 9th of November. This is absolutely incredible. The signed statement was released on behalf of the Centre of Indian Trade Unions, or Centre of Indian Trade Unions, CITU, All India Trade Union Congress, AITUC, Indian National Trade Union Congress, INTUC, and even BJP affiliated Hind Mazur or Hind Mazur Sabah, HMS, among others, stating that Indian trade unions must rise in solidarity with Palestine and reject the disastrous idea. Disastrous is quoted. The central trade unions have called upon the Indian government to scrap the agreement signed in May 2023 during Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen's visit to send 42,000 workers to Israel. Raya Sabha MP Saket Gokal posted on Twitter saying, these Indian workers will be replacing Palestinians, which means they'll be given the absolutely worst jobs that Israel's apartheid regime was forcing Palestinians to do. And why is Israel asking India to send laborers instead of any other country? That's because we're still seen by these countries as a source of cheap labor with no rights, and not as Wish Wagaru. And Tim, our correspondent, Red Planet correspondent, editor, all jack of all trades, Tim says, from my research, Wishwagaru means world teacher, linked with Modi's world mission and Hindu nationalist ideas of superiority. So basically, sort of like, you know, there's a little bit of Aryan language going on in there.
Well, yeah, he has this like this idea that he pushes of like, this is who India is. We are this kind of like you know, like this world teacher. Like we set this example through our kind of like, you know, like our like our example through, I mean, a lot of it's linked to his like Hindu nationalism and cultural idea, like his cultural project or whatever. So he's spinning it as like, this is, they want, you know, like they want Indian labor because we'll show them how it's done because of, you know, we're so awesome and such an example or whatever. Whereas this guy Saket is actually going, I actually know it's because they see us as cheap labor, just like they did with Palestinians, which I think is like, it comes down to money and an exploitable labor class, really, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's it, really. And we have some close by news in a neighboring state. Just across the border. Tell us about that, Sophie.
Sure. Bangladeshi garment workers' strike has shut down over 300 factories. So tens of thousands of garment workers in Bangladesh have gone on strike, shutting down over 300 factories. The largest, I think, march of this was 15,000 workers in one place. But the police, which we'll get to in a second, were reporting several different congregations of like 10,000 workers in different places shutting stuff down. Bangladesh's 3,500 garment factories account for up to, or about 85% of its $55 billion in annual exports, supplying many of the world's top brands, including Levi's, Zara, and H&M. These workers are paid as little as $75 per month. That's not day, week, that's per month.
Could you imagine?
So you can understand the frustration and the desperation of the strikers. Striking workers marching on the 9th of November vandalized vehicles and property and threw stones and bricks at police. A lot of the workers concerned just by demographic, I guess, are women. One of the main strike organizers, who is a woman, was arrested, I think, quite violently. I saw a picture of her in a stretcher. So there's been ongoing clashes, and large brands have the benefit from the cheap labor, have written to the Prime Minister of Bangladesh to ask for a successful conclusion to wage negotiations, which I think it's worth us taking a moment to point out means that they're asking to make sure these strikes are suppressed, make sure that they don't lose any of their margin on the price of labor going up. It's also implicitly, it's a threat that they will take their business to a different state, which has cheaper labor, if the Prime Minister doesn't keep the wages low there. Exporting union busting to the imperial periphery. But Tim, here. So you from Aotearoa, please tell me about something going on in Britain, specifically in Kent.
Yeah, in Old Kent, hundreds of activists have got together and shut down an arms factory in Kent this morning. Well, so was it yesterday morning, I think? I don't know, with time zones, maybe even the day before with it. Around 400 people left London on 8 coaches in the early hours this morning to take part in the action organised by the new group Workers for a Free Palestine, and they were calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. So, as workers and trade unionists, we have the power to disrupt arms supplies to Israel. We're taking this action because we will not stand by and let genocide happen with the backing of the British government and its arms industry, an organizer told Novara Media. BAE Systems produces the, what is it? It's like, oh, there's like a bit
the Hellfire missiles. Is that what it
is?
is?
Yeah, but this is the targeting systems used by Israel's F-35 fighter jets, currently being used to bombard Gaza. So, and so these targeting systems are made by BAE Systems Rochester. At the start of this year, Israel purchased 25 additional F-35 jets, taking its total fleet to 75. It's the only country in the Middle East to own any of the high-tech and deadly aircrafts, which it's currently using in its bombardment of Gaza. Israeli forces have killed over 10,000 Palestinians in Gaza in the last 4 weeks, including more than 4,000 children. Around 15% of the aircraft's components are made in the United Kingdom, according to a campaign against arms trades, representing tens of millions of pounds to the British arms industry each year. Alexandra, a teacher taking part in Friday's blockade, said, "As a teacher, seeing 185 schools and other educational institutions in Gaza bombed is utterly heartbreaking. If our government and the Labour opposition won't support a ceasefire, as workers we will continue to take action to stop the slaughter of civilians in our names, funded by our taxes. The British arms industry, which is subsidized by public money, is involved in the mass killing of Palestinians. We're here today to disrupt the Israeli war machine and take a stand against our government's complicity." So, an organizer pointed out that the group's actions are rapidly gaining momentum, with almost 3 times as many people taking part this time. There's a growing network of workers and trade unionists who want to organize in solidarity with Palestinians, they said. "We will continue to escalate our actions until we see a ceasefire and an end to UK complicity in Israeli war crimes." A member of Workers in Palestine, a coalition of major Palestinian trade unions, said, "Massive marches send a powerful message, but it's equally important to exert targeted pressures on governments and corporations that profit from the arms trade with Israel. We salute all trade unionists who took up the call made by the Palestinian trade union movement and acted decisively against complicity. Only such clear actions by people of conscience can bring an end to Israel's impunity." Wow.
It's so good. I want to add to this 2 things. One, this technically counts as our comrades of the show section because Amar Deep Dylan, who we had on a couple of weeks ago, they were at this action. And I asked them on Blue Sky to do a write-up for us if they had time. But they said, "Oh, listen, Novara just did it anyway, so just take stuff from there." So, big up, Amar. Thanks so much for alerting us to this. And also, as Sophie was saying, I think last week, this was echoes of Ne Passaran, the story of the Glaswegian engineers who blacklisted certain engines that were going to be used for Pinochet's planes in the 80s and the 70s. And if you are super doomed and doomery and feeling very pessimistic about what's going on in Gaza and all that kind of stuff, then just remember that actually the small action that these guys did in their factory in Glasgow back in the day might not have necessarily stopped a bunch of people from dying, because we know that Pinochet's regime murdered loads of people and it was very horrible and etc. But at the very, very end of the movie, spoilers ahead, so mute your ears for the next 10 seconds, they find out that they might have helped someone's dad or granddad get released from prisoner of war camp by using those machines to bargain with the state of Chile and Pinochet's regime. So even if this is what it means, solidarity in terms of like, you don't know what is going to come of it, but you know it's the right thing to do, and that's what counts. That's the most important part. It may not completely, make a huge dent in Israel's firepower or anything, but there's going to be something that comes of it later down the line. Now, speaking of firepower, I'm going to tell you now about a bunch of crypto enthusiasts, Ape Fest attendees who were blinded by the sheer power of NFTs and also libertarians operating UV lights. Okay, look, I'm not going to... I'm not the boss of you. I'm an anarchist. You can laugh at this if you want. I personally will not be laughing at it because I think my heart's in the right place. I feel sorry for these boys. It's not funny at all. Why are you laughing?
When you get to the floor price bit, we'll revisit this. Go on.
Why are you still laughing? Anyway, the latest in a long history of libertarians finding out the hard way what health and safety regulations are for. Bored Ape Yacht Club members have suffered potentially permanent eye damage after a light show at an event exclusively for holders of Bored Ape Yacht Club NFTs. There have been many reports via social media of attendees suffering eye pain and even requiring hospital visits, with one attendee warning, "Don't ignore this health hazard. Without proper treatment, it may cause long-lasting vision impairment and other serious damage." So, yes, I can't believe all these sickos in our Twitch chat laughing at this, you absolute bastards. What's wrong with you? Fix your hearts or die. This next bit you won't find funny even remotely. Twitter users have hypothesized based on a similar mishap. It's not even. I'm just laughing because I'm nervous. It's not funny. Twitter users have hypothesized based on similar mishap at an event in Hong Kong that the organizers may have used UVC light bulbs. That's UV-C light bulbs, which are not for light shows, but rather they're actually used for the disinfection of surfaces. The floor price, or the cheapest you can buy an NFT for a Bored Ape today, is 28 Ethereum, or $53,000. Our thoughts and deepest sympathies are with the staff who were forced to work this event for probably minimum wage. Yes, I agree.
Absolutely. I was saying to you before the show, I think about that post. Imagine paying $53,000 for a JPEG you can't see. And I just think about how much it would upset someone to see that post, but they can't. So it's okay. Right.
Sophie, tell us about some more.
I gotta get so professional right now. and read this very serious story. Okay. Anti-Zionist protesters sabotage a Friends of the IDF fundraiser event. On November 5th, Friends of the IDF tried to hold a fundraiser gala for the IDF as an opportunity to solicit donations, auction items to raise funds for the IDF, give speeches in support of the genocide, and screen propaganda. While liberal protesters basically engaged in, awareness raising and symbolic protest outside. Out the front of the gala, a group of autonomous anti-Zionist activists shut it down using direct sabotage by filling the venue's water system with concrete, causing a sewerage backup and rendering the venue uninhabitable. So, So before I go on with this, we are going to be talking about symbolic protest and awareness raising protest a lot in this episode. We are not. A lot of this communique kind of talks condemningly about the more liberal protesters, and I think it's fair to say we support a diversity of tactics as long as they've each been kind of assessed for their usefulness. There's plenty of symbolic protest that is useless. But this is, actually stopping. This has actually stopped the gala from happening, which has actually stopped money going to support genocide. So, pretty demonstrable how much more useful this was. That said, the other protest arguably drew attention, which made it easier for the sabotage to take place. So again, diversity of tactics. All right, this is a communique from the activists. For Palestine, to rebels everywhere, with deepest love and ancestral rage. We gathered with heavy hearts and humble hands, holding a promise for a world safer from white supremacist settler colonial violence. Those who declare war on original peoples and pillage sacred life and land will face retribution. There has been a great fire building. May it overflow and take all enemies of life with it. May it create fertile grounds for victory against violent occupiers. We took it upon ourselves to make sure these fascists could not gather. Rather than the constant reactivity and rigidness of mass protest spectacles, we wanted to hit them where it fucking hurts. You cannot do damage to the Zionist project by merely engaging with its facade. You must strike at its soulless heart. You must strike at its veins, brackets, supply chains, logistics, cash flows, infrastructure. While the Liberals were congratulating themselves for having their non-threatening photo op parade out in front of the gala, our people were out of sight at work on the veins of the building. Palestinians have suffered decades of Israeli soldiers and settlers restricting and destroying their access to water, often bricking up or concreting any water source not directly under strict control of the occupation forces, cutting off Palestinian access to the Jordan River while draining it to near extinction for settlement monocrop agriculture, shooting holes in Palestinian water towers, bombing Gazan water treatment facilities, poisoning Palestinian springs, and enforcing water apartheid in order to exert total control over Palestinian life. We decided to give these Zionist bootlickers a taste of their own medicine. So, they, as I said, they opened up the part of the water infrastructure of this building, which I believe was a museum, where the venue, which was the venue for the gala, and they poured concrete into it, which caused a backup, meaning that all the toilets would overflow, and no more water, like no more clean water would be able to enter the building as well. This is why I said that it makes the venue uninhabitable, which they say in a second. So it goes on to detail exactly how they engage in their sabotage. There's a diagram in the communique and step-by-step instructions saying, we cracked open the water main for the building housing the gala, switched it off, and filled the box with fresh concrete. This form of sabotage is quick and incredibly easy to replicate, and the tools are quite cheap. It also renders the building in question completely uninhabitable and unusable. The communique is signed off as follows. This was executed by a group of autonomous anti-Zionists and anarchist saboteurs. We have no name. We are not an organization. We are not an entity. Do not try to find us. We are everywhere, and we will not stop. Palestine will be free.
That's so fucking good. I love that. So good. It goes so hard.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to see there's more and more direct sabotage going on, as well as the protests that have been absolutely astounding in solidarity with Gazans. To see this kind of direct sabotage. There were those people blockading the boat in an Australian port. I can't remember quite where right now. And they were just like getting out in the water
Melbourne,
in front of it.
Melbourne,
yeah. There was some in Australia with the jet skis and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This is reminding me, Tim, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is reminding me of the Triangle of Sadness bit where all the toilets overflow and all the rich people are like swimming around in shit.
Yeah, I hope that's how it went down, because it's like, because even there's a lot of stuff that happens when you fuck with the water pressure like that. It's not just that water doesn't come out of the taps, but there's all kinds of things, like all kinds of mechanisms within the plumbing that rely
could be coming out of the taps. Yeah.
And there's like it relies on like, you know, like vacuums and water pressure and air pressure and things like that. So any number of fun situations could have happened.
Extreme fun. I, for one, enjoy a calamity-ridden day at the white supremacist museum trade gala. Just a wacky water slide for all of those fucking fascist bastards.
Yeah. But no, yeah, it's great. I particularly like how it is inspired by, you know, like what the IDF do to people not just living in Gaza, but just, you know, like Palestinians living legally in occupied Palestinian territory. It's a super regular thing. I was reading about it the other day, where it's just like, you could just be a family that live by yourself out in the middle of nowhere, have a little farm or something like that, and they might just come and just, you know, like empty your water tanks or just do stuff, just ridiculous stuff like that. It's this process of like long-term kind of like intimidation, just to make things harder for them, you know. And this is like everything from like sabotaging crops via water to, you know, just even just like, you know, drinking water and things like that. So yeah, it's great to see them getting a little bit of a taste of their own medicine. I don't think anyone could, like, if someone was to make a case against it, saying that it's like, you know, it's so extreme, it's, you know, it's dangerous or whatever like that, it's like not hard to turn it around and be like,
right,
look, well, this is what the people of Palestine have to deal with every day. You can't condemn this action on an inner city place where everyone in there has easy access to other water and everything like that.
Every single one of those fascist piece of shit rich cunts are gonna go to their hotel rooms, drink their fucking Voss water in their posh cylinders, you know what I mean? Like, fucking pricks. Who gives a fuck if they can't use the bogs for an hour? Fuck them. Anyway, Tim, you've got a little more good news for us right here, haven't you?
Yes. So, good news for people that like film and TV and everything that everything related to that. SAG-AFTRA is in negotiations to end the strike pending a member vote, which should come through in a couple of days. So technically, they've effectively ended it. They've basically agreed that the ending it is just a formality of actually doing the vote to say yes, we're ending it. So yeah, on the 11th, SAG-AFTRA released a tentative deal with studio executives, effectively ending the 118-day long strike. That's so long, 118 days. But they held out. They stayed pretty true to what they originally wanted. There was a couple of like little, give or take things here and there. But so the deal is still pending until the union members' vote is tallied on December the 5th. But the Guild says that some of the features agreed on will take effect during the ratification process, such as certain pay rises. So that means even though it isn't signed in yet, some of these pay rises are going to come in immediately or over the next couple of weeks or so until it kicks in. And so some highlights from the agreement include streaming revenue. So yeah, initially they were going for like a percentage, like royalties, but they actually ended up agreeing on, what is it? So yeah, the Guild says they have achieved the creation of a new compensation stream for actors in streaming shows and movies. So I think that was, instead of royalties, it's like they get bonuses that pay out for like, I think it's like streaming milestones and things like that. So they said it's a substantial bonus on top of existing residuals. And it'll go to actors working on programs meeting certain viewership requirements. So yeah, if the show is successful, they'll get bonuses and stuff. And then some of that money will also go to a jointly trusted distribution fund and distributed to other actors. So there's like, they get these bonuses when it hits a certain point, when the shows become, like profitable or whatever like that. Some of that goes directly to the people that acted in it. And then some of it goes to another fund that goes to other actors that, so it's not just the people that are in the successful shows that are benefiting from that one. The next one was other pay considerations. This is a broader one. So it says Guild members will get 2 wage increases in the first year of the contract, making a compounded first year increase of 11.28%, with further bumps in following years. And background actors, so, just like extras and stuff, we'll see similar increases, but with more of an upfront increase, as well as a 153% effective increase for series performers relocations. So I looked that up a little bit. I'm pretty sure it refers to how if they're shooting a series, actors will have to relocate to the filming location or whatever. So sometimes they have to do this, like, you do one series and you've got to uproot your life and go stay over there for a little while. And you're expected to do that on the same, pay as if you were just at home or whatever. And sometimes they're renting other houses, all this kind of stuff. So that's a huge bump for them. Next one is artificial intelligence. So this was a huge one. This was like one of the big ones that really kind of kicked it off initially. Same with the writers' strike. And that's why the writers' strike began at the same time, and they both were kind of striking in solidarity with each other. So then when the Writers Guild ended their strike, a lot of the writers continued striking with the actors as well, because of stuff like AI. So yeah, the Guild says that they've secured meaningful protections around the use of AI, including informed consent and compensation, where Guild members are replicated digitally using AI, both for living and dead members, and whether the replicas are created on set or licensed for use. So this is like, being licensed out. Like, sure, they do the part in the movie. Like I saw Nicolas Cage talking about, he did one for a DC movie recently where he was like, he was like this minor little role in a multiverse thing where he was Superman, and he was like, I didn't do any of this shit. Like, they filmed me for a second, and then like they built all this other shit with AI using my likeness.
Parallel universe in which Nick Cage played Superman. Like...
Yeah, but no. So that was actually a thing. So the thing is, they almost did that.
No, I know he was nearly cast for it, but like a parallel universe in which they paid him to do the work that they put him on screen for.
So that's things like that where it's like they use this actor's likeness, and they might get them on set for a minute and they film something, but then they just do other stuff. And so and so for stuff like in a movie, so that's what's considered digitally created on set, but then licensed for use is when like if they make an ad or a video game or anything like that, like a McDonald's tie-in or something like that where they use that actor's likeness further there, that's covered as well now. Yeah, so that was a huge part of it, because the Writers Guild, they were worried about AI for, like using it in writers' rooms where they basically just throw in ChatGPT shit at the wall and, making a show about it. But whereas the actors were more worried about being replaced either by, a digital replication of themselves or whatever, or just straight up. There's been a bunch of Disney shows that have been busted for having like extras, background actors, just fully replaced with digital like kind of actors or whatever. So this kind of pushes back against that a little bit. There's also some stuff in the agreement for healthcare and retirement. So they upped the contribution caps from the productions for their for the amount that they get added to like retirement schemes and all that kind of stuff. So that means that more money in general just goes to these funds, and it also, there was also stuff to help keep actors qualified for some of these benefits, whereas like sometimes they could become unqualified for certain things. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff to address things like diversity in the industry. There's a lot of stuff to make sets and just the entire kind of thing safer for people, particularly, there's preventative measures against like sexual harassment, sexual misconduct. There's, what else is there? There's some stuff for gender affirming care for actors as well. There's some stuff to address biased practices in hair and makeup. So this was, for everything from like, there's like a lot of people, particularly like Black actors and actresses, that they have trouble with, like makeup artists kind of doing the right kind of like shade makeup for them, but also even the way that it comes out on stage, like the way that people are lit, it's like very different to light a scene when you've got like someone who is really light skinned versus really dark skinned.
When you see like stuff that's been filmed with darker skinned people that's been lit correctly and like makes them look good, you like the moment you see that the first time, and I'm saying it this way around because it's so fucking rare and that's so infuriating. But once you see it, you then see like how people with darker skin are lit in practically everything else, and it's just like you can never like stop seeing it. It's so frustrating.
It's so bad.
It's so cringe.
Yeah. And so and like even like makeup comes into that with like the way that light bounces off and all that kind of stuff. But and there's also just like more kind of diversity requirements and stuff just for like different like actors and stuff. But so in a press conference, Fran Drescher, who is one of the leaders of SAG-AFTRA Guild, said that studios had heard that something had to be done, or this was not going to end well. So they worked internally to come up with some kind of modality. And that's her speaking about the bonus structure versus the percentage scheme that was initially proposed. Drescher continued saying that although the Guild knew that it wasn't going to accomplish what we needed to accomplish, she had to wrap my mind around the fact that we needed to make this work if we were going to get into another pocket. Ultimately, she said, what mattered is that we got into another pocket, and we did. I had to, I had to wrap my mind around that and not make the perfect the enemy of the good. So she's saying that they did eventually compromise, particularly in regards to the royalties kind of thing, but that that she's satisfied with the result that they got, where they brought the deal home. So yeah, cool. So that's another strike finished, successfully. The writers' strike and the actors' strike down, which means that we're probably going to start seeing more TV shows and movies and stuff coming out. And hopefully this means that with these protections for writers and actors, that they're going to be of a better standard, because we've been seeing some slop lately, and I'm ready for something good. But yeah, that's the news for this week. Before we get into it,
yeah,
let's take a little minute to remind everyone that the Red Planet stream is made possible by the direct support of you, the viewers, the listeners.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah. Via Patreon.
Specifically, patreon.com/red_planet.
Yeah. So check that out if you want to help contribute to keeping the show going. So we recently, just last week, like just after the show finished, I think we hit our goal.
It was actually as the show was finishing, but we all kept the game face on and didn't appreciate during the show. Yeah, incredible professionalism from the team. But we hit our goal, was what you were saying, John.
Yeah. So which was to hire an editor to kind of help do everything from like little clips of the show to, actually like just taking more pressure off Conrad, our producer, who does a lot of that stuff already. So he can focus just on other stuff. And now we're going to be able to get someone that is specifically just for editing. But the next step, we would like to hire a production assistant and researcher to kind of, again, take more pressure off. Because Conrad does a lot of this stuff, but we also do a lot of this stuff individually as the hosts and stuff. So we
can all focus on being like really hot and cool and funny only, and not have to know anything about the news.
Practice on that.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking like look at how hot and cool and funny we already are. Imagine if we could focus on that 24/7. It was the only thing that we as the hosts had to do. Imagine how powerful we will become. If we didn't have to
turn into the Giga Chad.
Yeah. Giga Mule is coming.
But you know what else? As well as that, as well as the note says, keeping our staff in gruel. As well as getting Conrad his gruel, our Patreon also helps us produce extra content, like our conspiracy theory analysis, history, and theory podcast limited hangout. Last week we were describing this as our conspiracy theory podcast, and I wanted to just clarify that we have not started a spin-off podcast where we invent conspiracy theories. The one where we talk about conspiracy theories that exist. And that, I mean, limited hangouts 5 will be about Pete Buttigieg, and I'm just gonna spit bars for like 2 straight hours.
Yes.
As well as that, so we got limited hangout, which is a little spin-off. It's for patrons only at the moment. It may remain that way, we'll see. It's available to all patrons though, and it's basically we talk about the reality of something, like Bill Gates is the first episode, and then we talk about how conspiracy theories work, and then we talk about what the conspiracy theories are about the thing, for example, Bill Gates, and you can kind of you can understand it better with an example. Also, our upcoming documentary about the ZAD, the Zone à Défendre in Notre-Dame-des-Landes, and we have plans to produce additional documentary projects next year. So all of that is made possible by the support of our patrons, and also becomes available early to our patrons. So really consider checking out Patreon.com.
I think, did you mention limited hangouts to the Democrats?
Oh, I mean, that is true. There's a second episode up
literally now. Yeah, 2 days ago that was put up, so you could go and listen to limited hangout number 2.
Yeah, if you want to know about the Democrats. Okay. Well, check out patreon.com/red_planet. There'll be more on ways to support the show at the end of the show. But now it's time for the main discussion. Protest, police, and press, the voice of the people, the immediate control of it by the state, and the ways that the media presents the people back to themselves. With protests against Israeli occupation heating up and Just Stop Oil protesters vilified constantly in the British press, today we're discussing the relationship between public protest and the state organs of ideological and physical control, the press and the police. So I think it's really important to say we're going to be talking about primarily examples with the British press, because I think we have probably the most captured press, like in like the Anglo and Eurosphere. Like it's really fucking bad. It's unbelievable. I don't know. Maybe Australia might edge us out.
Australia's pretty bad.
Like Australia's awful. I mean, Murdoch's from there, so that's the like it's his home turf.
That's definitely like true, because I think the way that Murdoch kind of runs his worst stories is well, it's obviously not Murdoch himself, but like the Murdoch press, the board, whatever they decide to run that month or whatever, they proto run it in Australia first, and then they decide based on the reception whether that's like good for Britain, good for the USA, etc.
Battle tested on Australian minds. So yeah, so we're going to talk about the British press, but I think this is stuff that just is broadly how like we want to have a discussion about like how capitalist media interacts with capitalist states, and like one of the most direct ways of that is there's this weird sort of like triangular relationship when there's a protest, and then there are police on the ground at the protest, and then there's press reporting on not just the protesters but also on how the police have acted, and it becomes this very interesting continual relationship. So like my first example I have, there were people who were on the ground tweeting at a Just Stop Oil protest in London earlier in the week. And basically what was happening was they'd shut down Waterloo Bridge, as they frequently do. And it's worth saying at this point, Just Stop Oil have a very strict like strategy guide that they always let emergency vehicles who are showing blue lights through. So if emergency vehicles are indicating that they need to be somewhere urgently, they let them through, because in their general strategy of trying to raise awareness and sympathy and like urgency about the climate crisis, they don't want people thinking that they don't value human life, because that's kind of the a huge part of their whole deal is valuing human life. So like if it were up to the protesters, they absolutely would have let the ambulance through. But they were tweeting that on the ground, like they were tweeting from Waterloo Bridge about how the cops were forming a line and not letting the ambulance through. And the protesters were saying to them to let it through, and they weren't. And they were saying, as this was happening, like, they're going to report that we stopped the ambulance, and we didn't. Just a couple of days later, I see on Sky News, Just Stop Oil activists block ambulance on blue lights on Waterloo Bridge, right? This is kind of a fascinating example, right? Because we just see, like, even though it's also like one of those interesting examples of where like social media gets to debunk like these kinds of lies, like in not only real time but like 2 days ahead of time in this instance. But also it's an interesting example in terms of like how protest is filtered through the media in this way. So like if the press were, I mean, this is Sky News, so literally Murdoch press, but like if they were interested in reporting the truth here, like the story would be explaining that like the publicly available information that like this is not the case, rather they're completely distorting it. And I don't want to kind of talk conspiratorially, like speaking of limited hangouts, like as if this is a kind of direct collusion of the police doing this thing and then the press working with them. I think it's more important for us to understand the ways that capitalist incentives come together to create a political agenda of defending capital, defending the state, defending the police. We talked about Tim, you brought up the propaganda model before.
I always do.
Yeah, it's your favorite. You're my propaganda model boy.
Yeah. I think it is probably Chomsky's like greatest kind of contribution to do the discourse. It's for those of you that haven't heard us talk about it before, Chomsky and another guy whose name escapes me for now wrote a book, Manufacturing Consent, about details something called the propaganda model, which is it's like a description of the way that media works to
I can't believe you completely forgot about Edward S. Herman.
Yeah. Yeah, so and it describes how, I guess, like the media landscape operates to push certain views and to suppress other ones, and sometimes it's not even intentional. It's so they come up with 5 different filters, and it's kind of this way where it's like, and all these news stories will come down, and if you imagine like these 5 different filters that filter out, like they knock these ones out, they knock these ones out, and then by the time you've passed through all 5 filters, only certain perspectives remain.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's more complicated than that, but that's the general gist of things. But
I think we should talk from the 5 filters way of looking at it for now, because it's like, I mean, because we're making a podcast, and like, so we'll have to be simple. But do you know the 5 things? I've got them here. Pop quiz.
You've got them. Okay, if you've got them there, you read them out, and we can talk about them, because I don't have them in front of me.
Okay, the last one that's always listed, but I think it's worth saying first here, is like a kind of McCarthyist, like anti-communist fear, that's just like broadly against anything that is challenging the capitalist status quo. And I think that like that's really worth us talking about when we just talked about this Just Stop Oil example, and we'll get to like Gaza solidarity protests in a minute, but like, because it's one of those strange things where like climate protests keep on demanding bigger change than they kind of seem to realize in some senses. Like there's a lot of liberals and liberal organizations who are like, we're not socialists, we don't support any particular ideology, we just want you to shut down oil. And it's like, well, shutting down oil, as I detail in The World Is Not Ending, like is shutting down like the American empire, shutting down global imperialist capitalism. And so like, so it is actually an anti-communist an anti-capitalist or a communist perspective to say those things, even if it's not being explicitly said. And in a weird sense, like the more liberal orgs like XR who say like we're not ideological, are like the press realize in more real terms like how leftist and how anti-capitalist what their protest is better than they do.
Yes.
But yeah, like there's this broad grouping that like is very observable, that like every left-wing political action must be bad. And yeah, we'll go over some more examples in a bit. There's a great clip of Chomsky actually in an interview saying there's this big piece of like common knowledge, and Gramsci says common knowledge is just the ideology of the ruling class. Like common knowledge and common sense is just like how you're supposed to understand things according to the people in charge. But there's this piece of common knowledge, Chomsky says, that the media is left wing. Right. And it is this thing that like everyone knows, right? The media is left wing. People in the media are a bunch of liberals. The media is liberal and left wing. And so it's repeated so often and checked against constantly. And this is part of how this like anti-communist filter works, is that like they perceive their own bias as being too left wing. And so they need to like check constantly that they're not being too left wing and filter out left wing perspectives to counter that. And so you have people, advertising the National Front's new hairdo, as Yardak put it, on national news, and stoking domestic fascism, all the while everyone's like, the media is too left-wing. One of the really bizarre things that we've seen in Britain in the last few years is like a stop paying your TV license, defund the BBC movement that is not from the left for all of the horrible shit that the BBC does. Like the BBC is, at this point, like a propaganda mouthpiece for the Tory government, and has been for a few years. And the abolish the BBC, defund the BBC, don't pay your TV license stuff does not come from people opposing the Tories. It comes from people who think that it's not being Tory enough, because it's common knowledge that they're all left wing.
We've definitely had that down here as well. Like currently there's a big thing, like these people complaining about like our mainstream media, like the Herald and stuff, and saying that, like they're saying that all of these places have like this bias against Israel and stuff, which is wild, because like they've been running stories about the, Israel and Palestine only having, you know, like a perspective from like Israeli people and not even talking to a single Palestinian, or like even mentioning that there are like Palestinian civilians. You know, it's just like this very like one-sided thing. It's like these people think that that is left wing because they're not saying like, oh, we need to just like completely, you know, we need to put a theme park on top of them or whatever like that. It's like, you know, it's like, it's it's absolutely deranged. You know, it's the same thing where they're like, of course the media is lefties, of course they are. It's like, okay.
All right, so next point in the propaganda model is access. So if you're a journalist, you're supposed to be able to talk to the people involved in the story. You need to know what they're saying. You need to report on it. If you don't have access to them, then you're going to be less good at being a journalist, because you won't be able to interview Keir Starmer about how the collapsing schools is a metaphor for the collapsing government. Except it's not, is it? It's real fucking concrete that could actually fall on children and kill them. Not that Keir Starmer cares. You need access, right? So access works as a filter, because if you are too hostile to the people who, you know, could be your sources, but specifically the ones who have many mouthpieces, you could be the one who's excluded if you're too hostile, right? Because if they can choose in a free market setting, right, between all of the different journalistic publications, and you're trying to press them too hard, and the reason that someone would be this person who has many different options for who to speak to is because they're a person in power, of course. That's just how it will tend. Like how it will tend to be, because like, oh, I mean, I can speak from some experience of this, actually. Like, when that Tory councillor claimed that I said that I would wipe my hands on my penis in a pub bathroom, she got to go right in the Daily Mail about it, and then the Evening Standard just republished her piece, like mostly quoting from it. And then like I had a couple of people reach out in Twitter DMs, and I had to like turn them down mostly, but it was because they're the British press, who are like horrifically transphobic, and I was like, nah, fuck that. And I ended up only giving an interview to a trans org and to Rolling Stone, because they're American, and because the journalist who reached out was non-binary also. Probably wouldn't have even bothered otherwise. But you know, it's like she got to write a completely bizarre, made up thing in the Daily Mail.
And probably got paid a lot of money for it as well.
Because she's a Tory councillor, right? And so there's the sort of basic access thing that leads to this situation in the UK, where like, to be in journalism at all, it's all about who you know, and it completely systematically excludes like working class people, except there are like some opportunities for working class people to work in journalism if they take a job at The Sun or whatever, you know, Destroy the Sun. Or the Daily Mail or whatever. It's all like the complete rags that print nothing but reactionary gibberish are the ones who will actually hire some like ordinary people. And then the more kind of mainstream established it gets, the more that it requires that you went to Oxbridge and know all the people. Sorry, so that's access. So yeah, if you are too hostile, then you could lose access. And you know, when we're thinking about the police, right? Yeah, it's pretty fucking dire to think, like, if you're talking about, well, someone might criticize an MP and then they're not able to like interview that MP to get access for a story, right? That's like, okay, well, they might still report on like, other people might report on the policies that are being made and do other interviews, and you can still comment in that sense. But when like if journalists are so eager to have access to like what the police are saying, this becomes like a kind of, I don't know, a very high stakes thing, especially when we come to protest. But maybe we'll get to that in a bit. Ownership, right? This is a good filter in it. Who owns the big capitalist media? Well, it's the ruling class.
The means of communication.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's the ruling class, and I mean we're streaming on a platform that belongs to Jeff Bezos right now. Even the you know, democratized media forms belong to the ruling class, and the police exist to protect the ruling class and their property. So this, as a filter, when as it regards the police, it's like very clear to see how how this filter will work, right? Because so we're already sort of like 2 points in to where these filters will protect perspectives that align with the police and discard perspectives that criticize the police. Because in terms of access, right, they'd rather have access to the police than to, you know, if there are a million protesters in solidarity for Gaza this weekend, then like these, you know, they can just sort of say, they chanted this, the signs say this, you know, and then like it's the what the police say that's like the precious interview. Ownership, yeah, it's straightforward. Flack is an interesting one. So flack is basically, if you've not heard this term before, it sort of refers to, well, it's a combat metaphor, but in this case it's referring to like complaints, angry emails, letters to the editor, this kind of stuff, receiving criticism of your publication itself that you need to like spend time responding to. If you think about this, like if you have any kind of open lines of communication to the public as a publication, right, and you need to have those, and you need to monitor them, because you might get complaints in that's like, hey, you misprinted this and you accidentally wrote a slur or something. You know, it's important to be able to get like letters to the editor or what have you. But these lines quickly fill up with people giving their opinions on the pieces that you print, right? And so if we think about the police, in this case, the filter is like people who like the police are definitely going to complain a lot more at negative coverage of the police than people who criticize the police are going to complain if there's positive coverage of the police. Or like, rather like, you know, we take our perspective, right? We think the police should not exist at all. If you're like writing something that's saying that like that just treats the police as normal and okay and good, when have any of us ever written into I don't know, the Evening Standard and been like, hey, why aren't you police abolitionists? We kind of take this implicitly as the perspective. I'm not saying here that like we should all do letter writing campaigns to these publications, but you can see how the filter works in this sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is there's a lot of the time where these things overlap. Like you get a lot of flack overlaps with you know, like the first one that we talked about, the fear, or which was initially in the book it was just anti-communism, and then it kind of got broadened to fear with like the Islamophobia and the war against terror and the eco kind of environmental activism kind of stuff, where it's like you know, there's like I know people that have written vaguely left-wing like articles or columns and stuff before, and just had like people just harassing them just purely on the basis of them being like lefty or whatever like that, you know, like people sending through like mass like emails being like, this person wants to, you know, like send everyone to gulags and all this kind of stuff, and it's like an article about like rent controls or something like that. So the people that write in, the people that harass people and do all this kind of stuff, they tend to be of like particular kind of persuasions, and you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Flack is a cursed filter on its own, and it's like, yeah, it sucks how right they are that it is a filter on the capitalist press, right? And yeah, so the fifth filter is advertising, which might not seem like it's an immediate relation to the police, but let's not forget the Met has a considerable ad budget and does actually spend a lot on recruitment ads. But even besides that, there are a lot of other advertisers who keep these publications running by paying for ad space, and they have relationships to the police as well, right? Revisit what we said about ownership. Like these advertisers are also of the ruling class and favor the police existing and don't want to see stuff printed in the paper that says, you know, get rid of the police or whatever. Yeah.
And the interesting thing, I think, a way of thinking about it as well is that like for advertisers, it's like you got to think about it in the way that they are selling advertising space to these corporations that or these, you know, these companies, whatever, because like what they're really selling is the access to the readers, right? Like they're selling like their captive reader base or whatever like that. That's a real product, what they're selling. So there's like a total thing, like, you know, like an alignment of interests and all that kind of stuff there. It's, you know, it's like you really got to think about it that way. And then I think it starts making sense about like you know, like, do they want to, yeah, I mean, like what sort of saying, like, do they want to put something next to, like, saying they're going to sell a new, like, there's a new Jeep, and it's like the advertising campaign is all about like going camping with your family and all this kind of stuff like that. There's certain stories that they're not going to want to run. Like, these people are like, I'm not going to advertise my new Jeep if the next page is like, you know, if you open it up and it's like showing me about like dead children in Gaza, you know, like they're like, you know, like there's like no one wants to advertise next to stuff like that. And it's like, you know, also just the idea that it's like things can, I guess, like negate the kind of, or I guess contradict the values or like the ideas of the advertisers, like to a certain extent, you know, and there's like a reasonable kind of level or whatever like that. You know, and I think that there is a level where flack can, you know, like be utilized by people on the left to against advertising.
I think that does happen fairly often, actually.
Yeah. That's a huge thing. That's how like we can push back, where we can be like, hey, bro, like interesting that you want to sell your Jeeps next to this, like, you know, like this article by Captain Nazi Man over here.
Yeah, no, exactly. It is a viable way, like, to target, like, use flack to target advertisers to get particular people, like, no platformed. We've seen it work with, like, I mean, a variety of guys, like you said, Captain Nazi Man is the big example.
You get a lot of these people where it's like, you know, like these like like Tucker Carlson, et cetera, where it's like they'll have an advertiser that will just be some like random company or whatever. You go like, hey, have you seen what, you know, this guy's talking about or whatever? Like, is that the values that you have for your company or whatever? And it's a surprisingly effective way to hit someone in the pocket, right? And it's like, obviously that's, you know, it works on us and it works on them or whatever. Most of these companies don't particularly care what is actually being said. Like, I've seen people lose advertising or, you know, losing sponsors over very little. Sometimes it's even just the idea that like, oh shit, we should drop it before we get cancelled or something like that, like this preemptive kind of thing where they're like, oh shit, oh no, you know, they just don't want their brand attached to a scandal or whatever. So yeah, but yeah, so advertising is interesting one.
Yeah, so what you said a minute ago about their captive audience, right, is the real product that they're selling to advertisers. So I think it's really worth us thinking for a minute about like the public who is being spoken to by the papers and the perception of who is being spoken to by the papers, because this is a really important part of the kind of, well, to say the news cycle would like, this is already a term, but like this, you know, the cycle of publication and like what it does to public opinion, because like there is a really real sense where like people think papers reflect public opinion, and they can see that the papers are reflecting someone's opinion, like some group, like some faction of the public's opinion. And also like if so many papers are being sold, then surely it must be reflective of the general population. But this is just obviously like fucking nonsense. A lot of people buy newspapers to do the puzzles, to check on the sports or whatever, and then they find themselves reading like Nazi propaganda.
Yeah, it's like this idea that it's like the newspapers are downstream from the public, where it's like it's the other way around. There's like so many times where we see like people saying or doing really like hateful things, or even like just the way that the discourse changes on like social media, where people are like saying all this like really just like deranged stuff, and then it's like you just, you know, you can see who they're following, and you go back up and it's like, oh, in New Zealand it might be like Mike Hosking or something like that, and it's like these media figures are saying the same things on their radio shows, they're saying the same things in their columns in the newspaper. It's like they're shaping the views of the, you know, the people downstream from them. And it's like they might be doing it like, they're not saying the quiet part out loud, but usually it's like you can see the common things here, not to be too conspiratorial or whatever like that.
No, I mean, I think it is worth saying like places where there's clear incitement as well. Like, so that like another example link I've brought up for the discussion today is a Daily Mail article. I'm very sorry everyone for how long this title is going to be. They're always like that. I hate the Daily Mail so much, but what do you expect? they supported Hitler. Literally, not kidding. Eco nuisances face wrath of the bin men, refuse collector screams at, quote, idiots sitting there like a bunch of lemons, end quote, as white van man and taxi drivers move mob off-road before 28 are arrested, brackets, but emotional American woman praises, quote, brave activists, close brackets, end title.
Normal reporting there, nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
So it's like, even in the headline, we've already got like so much fucking going on, again, as ever with the Daily Mail, right? But it's like the first thing they say is that these are eco nuisances. Like, it's implicitly already taking the perspective that like Just Stop Oil protesters are bad people who are wasting everyone's time. Right.
I wasn't much of a nerd in the way of like numbers or even music, like the thing that I really liked at school, but I was a nerd for English. And I just happened to be really good at it. And I know for a fact that if I, at age about 15, would have submitted that headline, I would have been probably put in the lower set. Do you know what I mean? Because they realize I need a lot more help to understand like what words mean and how they work, and just vile shit, honestly.
It's like, so people are often like, you see people discoursing over headlines a lot on social media, and they'll be talking about like the use of passive voice, for example. This is one that's been going around a lot in the last month, is like the use of passive voice, where like there'll be a headline that says this many Israelis were murdered by Hamas and these many in Gaza have died, right? And it's like, they're in the same headline, you see them switch voice to the passive voice because, like, well, they just died. It just happened or whatever.
Yeah. They just did that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Their water infrastructure just did that. It is worth, like, looking at this stuff and reminding people constantly about this stuff. But I think that sometimes it's like missing the woods for the trees a little bit, because like people talk about these smaller, subtler examples, and it's like this stuff, like in the Daily Mail, is the stuff that's like pouring out constantly every day to people. You've headlines that are really like this in like the Metro, which is like the free paper that's available on all the buses and all the tubes in London. And here they're just casually like, eco nuisances face the wrath of the bin man, right? There's immediately this positioning of like the effete climate activists and the Chad masculine reactionary working class bin man.
I just love the idea. It's like a movie title, like Eco Nuisance, Wrath of the Bin Man.
That's right.
So good.
And then like it ends up the headline as well with like with quoting someone who does like the protesters, but saying it's an emotional American woman. So firstly, emotional, secondly, woman, you know what they're like, and thirdly, not even from around here. So what does she know? I don't know how much we should go into like what's in the article. It's the Daily Mail, so it's gibberish.
Well, this is the thing about the Daily Mail, is that even though their headlines are so intensely incorrect, if you go into the article, sometimes it has the actual information about what happened.
It's very frustrating. It's
so incredibly absurd. Like, I just want to just point that out, because someone in the chat mentioned it, and it's like, they will pull people in or even distract people with these headlines that does the manufacturing of consent, but then in order to appease the...
Well, it's Ofcom, right? They want to, or does Ofcom do the papers? I don't know, but whichever communications, exactly, Ofcom. Then, like the regulators, basically, like they want to make sure that they're meeting a sort of baseline thing. But I mean, if we did go into it, it does literally start like, fed up motorists took out their anger on environmental protesters as they blocked a major junction in London today, with one irate van driver driving through them and another motorist dragging them off the road by hand. Like, I just kind of want to like use this as a bit of metonymy, like talk about the broad shape of like headlines in British papers that come out about Just Stop Oil, because like, I've seen a Metro headline, I couldn't track it down for this, but like I've seen a Metro headline that calls someone who attacked protesters a hero, while calling the protesters themselves like shameful. And it's just like, it's so removed from any kind of impartiality, obviously. But sorry, to return to the point that I was trying to like get through this example with is who they're talking to and who they're perceived as talking to serves a really important function in modern liberal capitalist democracy, because like when the papers are all talking to this like reactionary working class, there's this understanding that's repeatedly solidified that like the working class, and therefore like the vast majority of the population, are all like reactionary goblin people. And like this article is a good example of that, specifically because it is positing this like war between the liberals who care about the environment and taxi drivers and bin men, right? White van man and moves the mob off the road, drives his van through the protesters. A taxi driver says, I paid £70,000 for an electric taxi. I'm doing my bit. Why are you stopping me? This stuff. And it's just
it's exactly the same as the way they frame not just working class sort of like I guess like class divides and stuff like that, but also like social class divides, and mixing that with working class divides. Like whenever papers are transphobic, for example, they're constantly saying that there's a liberal transgender lobby, which makes no fucking sense, because every single transgender person I've met, and I've met a lot, they're all poor as fuck, right?
Yeah, exactly. Big transgender.
It's completely devoid of any kind of actual reality, which is because that's the most annoying and absurd thing, because the real person who is in the position of power, who is fucking everybody over, is the person writing the article, aka the paper, by extension, the board members.
So something that we end up saying on Limited Hangouts a lot is talking about like how conspiracy beliefs are social. So if a lot of people around you believe some conspiracy belief, you are likely to believe it too, because you're like, well, Tim and Mule, I think they're sensible lads and they believe this. So sure, I guess JFK's head just kind of did that. Like that makes sense. They believe it, so I believe it, right? But it's what I'm trying to get at is like, in terms of epistemology, like most belief is social. And if people around you believe something, then you're more likely to believe it. So if you're told that lots of people around you believe something, then you're more likely to believe it whether they do or not. And so this is the nature of this part of manufacturing consent, is that like when you tell everyone we're reflecting we are journalists and we reflect public opinion, and then we're publishing what public opinion looks like, and the public opinion is we fucking hate Just Stop Oil and we think they're bastards and we think they should be dragged off the road and executed while waving the St. George's flag, then people reading this are like, well, I don't necessarily agree with this, but maybe I can agree with like a more moderate version of this if everyone around me believes this. And like it's on the papers that are on every carriage of every tube train in the whole of London. So people must believe it, right? Like that someone must believe it.
Yeah, and it's so vile as well, because that you see that filtered down in like everyday human interactions. Like the other week, I met a friend's new partner, and they just so happened to be like a business owner, and so immediately I was like taken off the back foot. I'd had a glass of red wine. I was like not ready to speak to this person just in general, really. Like this person definitely like doesn't pay his staff well and all that, but before I could even talk about it, people were already joking about this stuff and and then we were speaking about activism, because he like looks at me and like goes, "Here's a crusty individual. Like, what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, actually, I'm an activist and a political
You should have said you're a
commentator."
business owner.
Yeah, technically I am, right? Technically I am. But I don't hire staff, and if I do hire people to help, I pay them what they want. But anyway, the long and short of it is that like we started talking just a little bit about like Just Stop Oil, and he immediately was like, "Oh yeah, well, all your mates in Just Stop Oil," like pointing at me, like, "All your mates, Just Stop Oil. I love watching them get dragged off the road."
Let's just be fair for a second. Like, they are your mates.
They are my mates. They are my actual mates. He didn't know this. He didn't know, but my actual friend Sean was it. He did get me, to be honest. Yeah. But he didn't know that. So this is
Sure. That's the thing, right? Like I always get that, like people talking about like, like if someone will bring up someone that's like Maori or whatever like that, and they'll be like, "Oh, do you know this guy?" And it's like, you can't just assume that because because we have the same like ethnic background. But yes, I do. I have known them for a long time. We went to school together. Just shit like that.
I had this with some transphobe replying to me, trying to be like, how can you defend like Sarah Jane Baker or whatever? Don't you know she's a violent criminal? And it was just like, well, we actually have met at protests and like, you know, but like even besides that stuff, it's just like, you know, the way that she's being treated in prison right now is like unbelievably disgusting.
The conversation went from there was I just started asking him how much he pays his workers and how much money he makes on events. So, you know, it kind of derailed from that. But what I wanted to talk about was I've been thinking about like the layers of propaganda, and you can see this in various ways because, for example, you have, if you think about the enemies of the state, you have, first of all, political enemies, right? So you have enemies within the state that are politicized, like protesters, activists, etc., Just Stop Oil, and the like. Then on top of that, you have marginalized people, right? Because marginalized people are often supported by the politicized people. They're often politicized themselves. They're intertwined. It's like that. Then underneath that, you have military imperialist enemies, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot because you can find a lot of leftists who are like super based and they know all the stuff. They know everything about solidarity. They know everything about this, that, and the other. But then they'll look at you and they'll be like, look at this article I found about China and how they're making like a giant guillotine to kill babies with it and all this. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? They've made that up. This is literally like the you know,
and the picture they're showing you is the milking factory video that Jordan Peterson tweeted.
literally. Yeah, so like, and it go. This is how deep it goes, right? Because you could get people who understand these like different oppressions and marginalizations, and they still have like a blind spot with stuff like this. And that is like the I think that pointing out to people the layers there is important, not just only for your own self-development as like understanding propaganda and understanding the nature of imperialism and the imperial core. You know, they've lied, you know, newsflash everybody, they lied to you about Cuba. You know, the people there have like housing and human rights and all this stuff. But it's I think also important and prevalent to talk about it with this discussion entirely, because this discussion is taking place at a time where there are millions of people worldwide protesting for what's, you know, against what's going on in Gaza, and in terms of like actually, you know, how the press is just like again and again and again repeating this line, and it's only very recently that they've actually like turned around and gone, oh yeah, well, we should talk about the fact that Israel's bombing hospitals and bombing ambulances and bombing refugee camps and all these other things that are like absolutely not necessarily, like definitely not military targets. And in fact, they haven't actually, and they're coming out with all this stuff and they're saying it, they're going, oh, sorry, we admit it. But it's like, even now, even still, like the hard line places, they're not talking about any of this still. And it's because it's such a big intersection. You've got the racialization of you know, Muslims in imperial core countries. You've also got it as like a direct enemy of the imperial core, i.e. Palestine, and the anti-colonization of it. And I guess also it's like the big politicized nature of it as well, because there's so much solidarity going on with trade unionists, you know, other activists, autonomous groups, etc. So it's like we're seeing this like very real thing. I know that's why you wanted to talk about this, like alongside like the JSO stuff as well. But like, yeah, it's you can see it in action as it's happening. Yeah.
Well, I've got a Sky News article from about yesterday here, which is 7 charged with offences after Saturday's London demonstrations as police confirm 15 officers injured. And like this is this is probably a good example of when I was talking about like passive voice and like not specifying the details to like let people fill in the blanks a bit, right? So like 7 charged with offences after Saturday's London demonstrations, right? Well, okay, so who and for what? Because there were also a bunch of fash. Who injured the police? I mean, we happen to know, right? If you have been on any social media at all, that like that the fash were like spent the entire morning fighting with the police. It's probably worth us covering some details here for a second, right? So Turning Point UK and like 4, I think, other like fash groups organized protests in the morning yesterday. One thing that like was probably a good like public order move was that like the police basically made them do their stuff earlier in the day. which led to them like burning themselves out, using up a lot of their energy, and like I say, fighting the police a lot. And you know, I don't mind the fash fighting the police. This kind of win-win.
It's pretty funny, to be honest.
Yeah,
yeah. There's actually I want to talk a little bit about that. Sorry to butt in, Soph, but like it's just a tiny bit about that, because it is always very, very funny. If you're always like, if you're worried about watching these like, you know, violent men attack police and stuff like that, no, it's still funny. Like, you should still watch it, like, because the police are obviously like so annoyed, they're so pissed off. It's like, don't you understand, we're on your side? And then also the fash are going, why aren't you on our side? And they're just so thick, like they don't understand, and it's great. It's just great fun all around. And also the fash got posh. I don't know if anyone else noticed this. I do want to point this out, and I think that this is genuinely like the fault of the Tories. The fash were doing quite well during, I guess, like, I want to say like 2016 or something like that, but I think that like a lot of poor people who used to support the EDL and you know, Football Lads Alliance and stuff like this, they're all completely fucked, and they've been radicalized. They've been turned into leftists because a lot of the dudes I was seeing, they were wearing like these dead posh, you know, like detective coats. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, really clean looking, like just out of River Island and shit like that. And I'm like, these are all petty bourgeoisie losers. Like, this is who they is.
Yeah.
And they're actually
this
like
is your small business owner. Yeah,
they were literally small business owners. That's exactly it. There was a couple of guys that I think Danny fucking Price on Instagram, he like basically told everyone where they work and stuff. And like, yeah, they were basically just like management position kind of people if they're in corporations, and also business owners. Like, one of them was a driveway doer.
Like, after January 6th, right? The people were finding out that like some huge number of them had like flown together in a private jet and shit like this, and like the mass of them were all just like people with like small business owners.
That's like when there was the vaccine mandate protests over here. There was, I've mentioned it before on the stream, there was a guy that I tattooed who his boss, he was a trucker, and his boss owned the trucks, and his boss was like, I'm taking your truck to drive down to Wellington for the second. His boss isn't like a truck driver or anything like that. He obviously has a license for it, but he's like, I'm gonna, I'm commandeering your truck to drive down to Wellington to be part of this protest. And he's like, this guy's like he's like an office guy or whatever like that. He's not a trucker like the rest of us. But but he took it off, and he's like, gave him a paid week off and all this kind of stuff like that. So he was like, I don't really care, like whatever. But yeah, you know, like this thing where it's like, we also saw a lot of farm owners taking their tractors and things down and joining the convoys, where it's like, these aren't the people that normally operate this machinery. They're not farm workers, but they're farm owners. You know, it's just like this co-opting this kind of like working class aesthetic, but they're really, you know, they're the bosses. They're not like that.
Exactly.
This guy I was talking about at the dinner with my friends, he was a farm owner.
Yeah. Some of them can be pretty bad, and down here it's particularly bad. I'm sure they're not great.
Let's learn about these 7 charged with offenses. So we've got, where was I? The 7 people who have been charged will appear in court in the coming weeks. Their charges relate to offenses including assault, possession of weapons, criminal damage, public order, inciting racial hatred, and possession of drugs.
The wording.
No, yeah, I mean, it's all very neutral, and you also like have to be aware that like inciting racial hatred has been like people have been slapped with this with like anti-Semitism charges, including Jewish people in recent weeks because they've been defending Palestine. But the thing is, this isn't the case here. Like, this is like when we get right to the end of the article. It says, after like discussing some specific people, so it says like John Harvey, 75, from Hackney in East London, 23-year-old Ethan Stapley from Norfolk were remanded to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court. It doesn't tell us like any of the details, like, and you could say, you know, this is good journalistic practice that they don't want to speculate on stuff that's an ongoing like court case or whatever, but we have to get further down to get to a quote significant number of these arrests were counter protesters arrested in Pimlico when they tried to confront people in the pro-Palestinian march. Like, it's really buried deep in here. And, you know, like, to be fair, it is said, but it's like, we all understand like the power of like a headline as opposed to what is said in the article. They also have around 150 pro-Palestinian protesters were intercepted by officers after breaking away from the march through London. It is understood that not all of these protesters were arrested. Yeah, cool.
The wording, like, even in the first paragraph, it's like, it says here, officers made 145 arrests during the pro-Palestinian demonstration and counter-protest by far-right groups.
Right, during the demonstration. And it's like,
yes.
But like, yeah, exactly.
You know, it's just so clearly worded in such a manner.
And the assistant commissioner said the force faced a really challenging day. Oh no. They had to do their job for one day. But this, I think this speaks to some of what I'm talking about with the like speaking to a reactionary faction of the working class as if that's the whole working class. But I think what's more interesting is the lead up that like I think people have been aware of. I don't know, like I kind of put it to you, Tim, because I think in Britain we've been super aware of this. It's been all over the media, but I don't know how much it's like breached containment. That like the discourse around the cenotaph. Do you know about this?
Oh, I have seen a little bit about it. It's like the war memorial, right?
Yeah,
because I think we've got one here too.
It's a big pillar that is just in the middle of the road that runs between the Houses of Parliament and Trafalgar Square. So like practically every protest goes by this thing every time there is any kind of protest.
I saw someone like spray painted on it or something like that. Is it?
That's a thing that has happened in the past, but like this is like so it the thing that's really unhinged here and what I'm trying to get to is like none of this was about stuff that has happened. This was all build up because they were aware that these weekly protests were going to crash into Armistice Day, and so this discourse was started in the media about how shameful it is to do a mass protest on Armistice Day and how much it disrespects armistice, which is crazy because we're literally calling for a ceasefire. Like,
let's also be clear here. Me and Sophie, for our sins, we're British in it, right? And I don't know about you, Soph, but I've been on about 33 Armistice Days, and I know that, you know, most of the time I observe the 2-minute silence because I'm in bed sleeping. And you know, I'm never awake for that, but then the thing is that everyone, even if they go to the protest, it's not a protest, even if they go to like an event that's going on, it's normally poppy placing by local councillors. That's normally what happens. If you like, Sophie's talking about the cenotaph in London, but there are cenotaphs all over the UK for various different regiments that came from that place. And the one in Manchester, for example, like every year they have a thing where local councillors and the mayor, they'll put poppies, like a wreath of poppies on the cenotaph. And I know for a fucking fact that every single person who goes to those particular things goes to the pub and gets twatted afterwards, like absolutely fucking battered. Like as soon as they get an opportunity, as soon as they're done, it's gone. We are getting fucking 20 pints deep and getting our ass out. So any kind of like idea that Armistice Day is this like sacred British tradition where like, oh, you mustn't do anything on Armistice Day, how crude. You know, these motherfuckers, these gammons went down to the fucking cenotaph sniffing cheap plasterboard bing, you know, getting absolutely off the tits and like punching police, you know, just to get to the cenotaph where nothing was happening there.
Let's get to that because I want to talk about the week that's been leading up to this, because the media has been talking constantly about the cenotaph, right? And it's not the first time, right? If people remember when Jeremy Corbyn was leader, every Armistice Day, people are supposed, like the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition together come and lay a wreath of poppies on the cenotaph. And the media had an absolute field day when Corbyn, who's an old man, wore a windbreaker because it's kind of cold, instead of a suit and you know, formal jacket. I suppose he should have been in like military regalia and a trench coat. But it's, you know, it's like Mule's saying, like this is a complete fucking piss take. for the people for whom it is some kind of holiday and they are like marking out the day, the rest of the day is quickly forgotten. And nonetheless, like it's this massive furore, right? And I think there's kind of an interesting ideological function here. So Nat and I often talk about the function of like monks, right? For Christian believers, is that like there is someone who is more pious than you, who's far away in a special building doing the believing, right? And they live a really holy life. And that means that you can do kind of whatever, as long as you occasionally repent and show up for church and all this stuff.
Because they got most of the work covered, right?
Yeah, like the real work of faith is happening somewhere else. I think that like for a lot of people who live in whatever fucking reality these papers are publishing to, right? The cenotaph on Armistice Day has a bit of dysfunction. And so like the performance of the ceremony of the poppies and the wreath and the 2-minute silence, like all of this is sacred. And it doesn't matter if like you're not perfectly nationalistic the rest of the time, because they're covering the nationalism for you. And so like, you know, Corbyn not being respectful enough, of course he doesn't, because he hates the military and he wants every troop to be beheaded. And then so in the week leading up to this weekend right now, the press has been going constantly about how these protesters better stay away from the cenotaph. So I've got an example here. Yeah, I've got an example here from the Daily Mirror, whose O has been replaced by a poppy. And the front page is a picture of the front page is a picture of the cenotaph from a previous year, completely covered in poppy wreaths. And the text next to it says, "They fought and died for our freedom. ... Freedom of speech and thought ... and protest. To Suella Braverman," that's our Home Secretary, "how dare you try and take that away?" We'll get to that in a second. To the marchers, "Remember who won you these freedoms. To Britain, we must all resist cynical efforts to whip up hatred." So, you know, just fascinating shit going on here.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I first saw that headline, I was kind of like, oh, that's okay. It's all right. It's like they're trying to say, actually, it's fine to protest on the same day as the armistice.
Nah.
But they're not. Like they're not. Like it's so very insidious. And if you're just not really paying attention and not reading between the lines, you're just gonna miss that, you know?
Yeah. So in the text that's on the front page, it has Suella Braverman's attempts to pressure police into banning a pro-Palestinian march on Armistice Day were dismantled yesterday. The Home Secretary accused the Met of playing favourites with the protesters, but the Royal British Legion, which runs the Poppy Appeal, said our armed forces play a vital role in protecting the rights and freedoms of everyone in UK society, including the right to protest. So I feel like, this is where I started to think like this would be a really interesting discussion, is like the relationship between police and press and protest, because like the Met were like required to kind of come out and comment on this because Braverman was saying that they should shut down the march because it's like, and this is a side where like the modern Tory party are very, very aware of their like propaganda potential, and so they do things like this all the time where they are trying to like make a PR move and get the press to respond in kind, and then like they know the people who work in the press, so they can just like call them up and be like, hey, run with this, like this is the tactic now and this is what we're going with. And so they were trying to to like create this charged point around the cenotaph, and they've been doing it all week, anticipating that this thing might happen, even though the planned routes for the protest were not through the cenotaph. So Mule, you were saying that the fash all stormed it on the day because it's because of all this, right? Like a lot of the times what you'll see in Manchester anyway, some of the funniest this happened around Black Lives Matter. I don't know if anyone remembers, but this happened around the George Floyd protests, and there were constantly like a group of maybe like 10
weird fucking idiots in like flat caps and again these like posh jackets and stuff like that, and a lot of them were Walter Mitty types as well. I'll explain what that is if anyone doesn't know in a sec. But like they were just hanging around the cenotaph like weeks on end after the Black Lives Matter protests, because even back then I think it was Priti Patel, I might be wrong, it might not be, I can't remember exactly who was Home Secretary back then, was talking about like the fact that they had like, you know, taken the statue of the slave owner Edward Colton or whatever his name is, fuck his name, I spit on his name, I shit on his name, wipe my ass with his name, I don't care, but that guy in Bristol, he was like put in the drink, and so they were like terrified about that, and all these like losers, these fascist losers were like hanging around the cenotaph. Now, Walter Mitty types, I will explain to you what that means. Walter Mitty was like a character or like a famous, semi-famous person back in the day who lied a lot about a lot of the things that happened in his life. And I think some of those things were like being in the military. So if you are like a military, if you're like a squaddy, if you're home on leave or whatever, it's basically like, if someone is taking the piss and stealing valor, you call him a Walter Mitty, or like, oh, he's doing a Mitty kind of thing, yeah. And there were literally people who were doing that, because I had a friend at the time he'd been in the army, and because he was a bit of a brave bastard, probably because he was in the army, he walked up to these fash and was like, "What's your regiment?" And he was like, "Oh, well, you know, it's the one." And it just like stuttering, and he kept saying like, "What's your number? What's your position? Blah, 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 this, that, and the other. Blah, 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 blah. Who's your commanding officer? Like all this stuff." And my man was just like, "It's none of your business. Actually, I think this is harassment." Blah, blah, blah. Like, so these are just wet men, big.
It's funny because you know that like real kind of veteran dudes just love to just fucking talk about it, eh? Like they love to be like, yeah, actually I was in this and I did this, and it's like they never shut up about it.
And like as well, you know, if you're like a vet who's been radicalized against the system because you watched for example, I make no apology for the IDF in general, but there are definitely like liberal young people who have been like completely fucking propagandized into joining the IDF. They don't really want to do it, and they don't really know the truth about what the IDF does, and they're sat next to a guy who just goes, "Yo, watch me pop this child," right? And that's gonna fuck them up for life, right? That's gonna fuck someone up for life. And then, you know, later on in life they've been radicalized against something like that. They're gonna be mad at people stealing that supposed valor. They're going to be like, you have no idea. You have no fucking idea what you're talking about. You're sat there trying to like use my experience, which was fucked and not what you think it is, to defend this bizarre fascism that actually I was a part of abroad. You know what I mean? Like this is like a huge thing that happens. Loads of vets become radicalized to the left.
Yeah, it happened in the early 2000s a lot with like the war on terror and stuff. You know, there's a lot of people came back that had seen and done terrible things, or like a lot of people came back like disabled because of.
We've had a couple of them on the show.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, and a lot of them do become really staunch kind of like, you know, anti-war activists. And I mean, it's like, you know, like there are always people that will be uncomfortable with organizing with people that have been veterans and all this kind of stuff, like, you know, and you kind of have to respect that. And I think that like the best activists that are, you know, from military backgrounds do understand that, you know, they go like, oh yeah, I might make, you know, some people uncomfortable because I was probably abroad, you know, shooting up their cousins or whatever like that. And I think, you know, like there are people that understand that, and they do genuinely kind of like wish to kind of make amends and stuff. But yeah, it's like I think that is a group that is maybe like historically under appealed to by the left.
I mean, recognizing like soldiers as working class people who've been like fucking conned into the most dangerous situation, like, is something we could all do a bit better, I think.
Yeah, like the material conditions that force people into army recruitment in the States, particularly, pretty rough. Like, and I'm not saying like, and I still think it's like, it's a really fucked up thing to do. You know, it's like to, you know, like go and like, you know, like go to war basically, to like pay to college or whatever like that. Like, I don't want to minimize that. Like, I still think that's like a really horrific thing to do, but like you do have to like, you know, we have to approach this and like, this is a thing that's happening, why does it happen? You know, it's not like an excuse for it, but this is like a reason for it. This is a huge tangent, but when we look at like like the October Revolution and stuff like that really kicked off when the soldiers, when the army went like, oh, actually, yeah, we are working class, we have more in common with the Bolsheviks and etc.
Absolutely.
Than we do with the guy living in the gold mansion, and and that's just,
absolutely.
That was the big point. So
so the stuff with the cenotaph, I think it's really interesting to think about this point of the fash storming it so that they can do what, right, is the question. And I think in their minds it's like guard the cenotaph from the evil pro-Palestinian protesters who are all queer and all foreign and all students and all hate the king or whatever, and that's true.
Completely true, so, no lies.
Yeah, absolutely. So here is like an interesting like thing to do with like when we're talking about the press and the police, this relationship, like what's happened in this last week doesn't just like involve the press relationship to the literal police, but to policing in general, because like fash obviously just like want to be the cops. Like it's the biggest thing they cry about at any point, at any given time, is that the cops aren't on their side, uplifting them, giving them all the powers they possibly can, completely agreeing. Like even though the cops already are fash, like they're not fash enough for the fash, and they're always crying about it. And so like a lot of I think the work here with like appealing to the reactionary faction of the working class is that this capitalist media like wants to give them their like marching orders. And so I think it's so clear, like the specific point of like the fash storming the cenotaph shows so clearly the way that they were directed by the press here into a sort of deputized fascist policing, like a citizen's police force.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
And so like what else did they do that day, right? They started drinking at 7 a.m. With all their gammon mates, getting ready for like, whatever slur bashing they had decided they were going to do in their WhatsApp groups and their Discords. And then like a bunch of them invaded Chinatown really early on in the day, like before the Palestine March had even started. Invaded Chinatown. They were chanting Tommy Robinson's name. They were fighting with cops. And like it's just it's completely overshadowed by the vastness of the solidarity protest and like how powerful solidarity for Palestine was yesterday. But I think it is still really worth us looking at like how, I mean, to put it plainly, how the enemy is organizing, because they are like using the capitalist media as like a route to just be able to like directly tell the fash, hey, the cenotaph is in danger, get out and protect the cenotaph. And if there's enough of you doing it, you can get out and organize towards your own goals as well. And so they did, right? So they decided that they were going to like gang up and beat up any not white person they could find, or like go protect the cenotaph and whatever. And like again, in this way, the like public order was like fairly well maintained, because like they got it all out of their systems by about noon, and then like other than people like other than a few incidents, like a lot of it's just been like the fash realized they were hopelessly outnumbered, and already a bunch of the most violent guys who got arrested fighting the police. So not much happened. But like, and that's a kind of interesting, like this case specifically, like there's a tension between the press and the police here. I think
that this really highlights what we spoke about a good 10 or 20 episodes ago, which is mobilizing versus organizing, right? Because this is a great example of mobilization without any organization, because fascists, whereas their stated goal, it's obviously not broadly stated, but get our country back, whatever that means to any of them. They don't have any organization, and they don't have any sort of like idea of what solidarity means. They're not like, their mates who get put in prison for beating up, racialized people or whatever. They're not like rallying around them to like do like bail funds or whatever, like stuff like this like doesn't really happen. A lot of the time, obviously, fascists are well off enough to be able to like sort that stuff out themselves, like, you know, pay for solicitors fees and stuff like that. But they don't, you know, they don't do any of this actual solidarity. They don't understand solidarity. There's like one instance, I think, recently of like, I don't know if it was the EDL, but it was someone and they were trying to like feed homeless people. But from all like accounts, it kind of looked like just a bit of a publicity stunt, and then not like making it a regular.
Oh yeah,
go
there's a
with
lot
it.
of stuff like that, right? Like, yeah.
So then what you have to look at then is actually we're lucky that they're not organized, because it could have been much worse, and it could be much worse in the future.
It just tends to be like so hard for Fash to organize on this kind of scale. Like I think when we had a long time ago, when we had Tia on, we were talking about January 6th, she said the January 6th was the stochastic apotheosis, that like in terms of like stochastic terror, in terms of like making a call out for the general mass of Fash to like organize amongst themselves to do something, like January 6th was like the absolute like most that could possibly hope to achieve, which is like a bunch of rowdy small business owners show up with guns and zip ties and whatever at the Capitol, and shit is scary, but like it does not achieve very much at all.
There's no long-term plan. There's no coherent ideology that they all agree upon. Like it's the same as like down here with a lot of these kind of like larger reactionary protests. Like there's like there's like a whole bunch that we've had over the last few
the one
years.
you were talking about, the trucker convoy.
Yeah. They just kind of like fuck around and then they go home, and like in between it's like they'll start off like 5 different groups will come together, run this protest, and then like 15 groups will separate because they've all splintered and like, you know, because they don't agree, because some of them are like, you know, opposed to one thing, but they don't really care about the, it's just like, there's nothing that binds them.
Yeah, which is why institutional capture is so important to fascists, because like they're just never going to have the numbers to have like a full fascist nation where everyone loves being a fascist. Firstly, it's fucking miserable being a fascist, because being a fascist is being a huge loser who hates joy. But like, secondly, it's just not a well communicable like ideology. It's something that relies on like excesses to the system. Like it's like the systems of oppression that exist, right? They have excesses. So if someone is like a violent misogynist, this is an excess to patriarchy, right? Patriarchy relies on the idea that like men command more authority, and you should do what men say, especially the more of a patriarch this man is, and that women command less and are emotional and so on. That system of control, like on its own, doesn't appear to need like guys who are like absolutely violent misogynists who are pushing for like women to have absolutely no rights and be treated as like chattel property or whatever, right? And yet these guys still exist. They're excesses to the system. If you understand like more about excesses to systems, you see that like they are actually very necessary for these systems of oppression to exist, and that sort of is part of the bind of them, right? So what is the excess to capitalism? Well, it's fascism. So like the thing is, like the system does need this particular excess to exist in order for it to keep on functioning. And like the way that the press plays with it is a good example of looking at that. Like they are an excess to all the systems of oppression that hold us in place. And so when the press are like trying to mobilize and make their ideology manifest into something, right, they speak directly to the reactionary like faction of the working class and say, show up and do something. But then, you know, if the end point of this is that like the liberals lose control of the Frankenstein's monster they've made, right? It's always what's going to happen. But I wanted to, I think I have another link. Yeah, we're good for time. That's right. I have another link that we should hit before we carry on with the discussion, which is another Sky News article. So the Sky News article I was on before about the people being arrested, it was very neutral in its language. So it's, in some ways, it seems harder to, unless you're just talking about like the effect that headlines have on people, it seems harder to see how it's trying to manufacture consent and what it's doing. This one, I think it should be easier. Yeah, so it's met appeals for help identifying protesters holding hate crime placards during pro-Palestinian march. so it's got like leading in, it's got I don't want to show any of this or discuss any names if there are any in the article, because like this is entirely focusing on pro-Palestinian protesters, right? So the first two photos are like the Met inquiries are basically based on the contents of the signs. So there are two women in these. There's a woman in each of these photos. One of them is she's not white, and she's holding a. It's relevant that she's not white because of the nature of the crime that she's being investigated for. Is basically that like Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman's faces are on coconuts falling off of a tree in the placard, and so like this is it is being alleged as some sort of like racially motivated or as some sort of racial hate crime by a South Asian woman against two South Asian people, like normal. The other photo has a woman who is holding a sign that says no British politician should be a friend of Israel, and has a swastika inside a Star of David on the sign. Now, this one I'm not super fond of. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's not great.
Not doing great. Rethink the sign.
Yeah.
That's all.
You can see what they're trying to say,
exactly.
but you got to make sure it's clearly the one that's on the Israel flag. You can't just have a Star of David like that.
No, exactly.
I've got Jewish friends that have mentioned about this, and they're just like, yeah, like, like obviously we love the energy, but like this is not it, because like the Star of David is still very important and central to our faith.
Absolutely. And there's also an element to which like, it's really worth pointing out that Israel are doing a genocide. It's really worth pointing out that they are literally fascists. But like when you are trying to criticize Israel and instinctively reach for like Nazi comparisons, it's like, well, like why does it specifically have to be the Nazis who you're comparing them to? Like I suppose there are kind of cultural, like the worst evil ever thing that we reach to, but at the same time, like we can see that there is, when you go to the effort of putting a swastika inside a Star of David, there's something else going on there, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure.
There's also this thing that I saw someone mention it on Twitter the other day, and it's something that I've spoken about. I think we've spoken about it on here before, but the idea that the Nazis and the Holocaust were this kind of like this cultural idea of just like, this is the worst thing. This is like this evil thing that is like, this is like fucking Sauron, and like nothing else comes close. No one will ever get there again. Whereas like what we're seeing now, the reality of it is this is a series of like, of small changes, small policy decisions, all these kind of things that build up over years. And it's just like, this could happen anywhere. This is happening in Israel right now. It's happening in the States. It's happening in the UK. All these kind of things like that. And it's like the Nazi thing kind of like it serves to push that away from us. Like to be like, this thing is so evil that it's like, it's uniquely evil or whatever like that. Where it's like, I think that helps people, especially like liberals, kind of think of it in that way, where they're just like, like this is really, really evil, and we need to, we need to show how evil it is by showing how it is close to this, like, this historically really terrible thing. And I mean, obviously, like I know people, a lot of Jewish people as well, that have pointed out like, parallels and all this kind of stuff. But like the reality is, it's like, even the Nazis weren't uniquely evil at the time. They were running from other people's playbooks from America.
Sure, yeah. It's the banality of evil. This is it, right? Like there's a couple of meanings to this. One is like the way that it's every day and carried out by people who are, just doing their job, just following orders. But there's also like the way that it follows in a legacy. And so there's just like people who are, and that's what I mean about excesses, right? It's like the Nazis who are taking inspiration from the British Empire, from the Americans, and then they repeat these things but amped up. And it's like, this is the most evil thing we can possibly imagine. And we always have this idea that it's this exception to history, but it's not. It's an excess of history and all the forces that shape history.
My general policy going back like forever, and I, this older kind of like punk dude at a protest a million years ago said this to me as well. He was like, it doesn't matter if you're at an anti-Nazi protest, don't put a swastika on anything, because then you're just a person with a swastika.
Yeah, exactly. There is one graphic design context where I am happy to see the swastika, and it's that anti-fash sticker where someone is smashing it to bits. Like it's just a fist coming in and smashing a swastika to bits, and it says like bash the fash. You know,
you have to be really careful even with stuff like that as well, because like you have to make sure that it's smashed enough that like from across the street someone just doesn't see that and go like, there's someone wearing a swastika.
Yeah,
you know, it's
exactly.
like and even like I know a lot of people that have made t-shirts like that before, and they're like, oh, we did it in red and white, but with the red it looked, it was like
totally
swastika like, so we took the red out, so it's just the white. Just stuff like that. It's like you have to think really careful, because otherwise it's like, especially if you're going to an anti-Zionist rally or anything like that, because it's very easy for
because it's the Zionist, like it's part of the very literal Zionist playbook when they've literally published like ways to talk about Israel, is that like, anti-Semitism is the main defense of like all criticism. So like when if you make that fucking easy for them, then you're making that easy for them. This
fucking government, this fucking Ministry of Truth ass government is saying that a house that got covered in paint in West Hempstead like 2 months ago is related to what's happening now.
Well, clearly it inspired Hamas.
They will do anything. So if you have something like that, you just fucking... I don't like using the term asking for it, but you're giving them a lot of fucking...
No, you're doing their work for them a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's several things in this article that I want to talk over, but there's the I'm saving the best till last. So they have various pictures that have been circulated by the Met Police of people who they're trying to identify. Again, I'm not linking the article. I don't want to help them identify anyone. I don't really care what they did. They're pro-Palestinian protesters. ACAB. So, it has one image showed a woman carrying a sign featuring the Jewish Star of David wrapped around a Nazi swastika with the slogan, "No British politician should be a friend of Israel." Another showed individuals wearing what were described as Hamas-style headbands. I assume they're quoting the police when they say described as. I don't know. It hasn't cited it anywhere.
Well, the best thing about this one is that in the image, they're wearing headbands that are green, and they have like text on that looks like it might be from the Hamas flag. I don't know. Now, I don't speak Arabic, but I was talking about this earlier with my partner. Kira Chats, our sweet Kira Chats on Blue Sky, actually did a really good example of this. If you take like the very common image of an Intifada fighter with the red headband on, that has white Arabic writing on it, lots of white supremacist news corporations use that as a very scary, oh look, a scary brown person.
Must be exactly the same as Al-Qaeda, yeah. Must be the same as ISIS,
literally,
yeah. And it just says like fighting for the liberation of Palestine. Exactly.
That's what it says. So I don't know what it says on the Hamas flag.
Right, but a Hamas style headband probably will just say, Anyway, so it goes on to say, as protesters gathered at the start of the route to Hyde Park, chants of "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" could also be heard. The slogan is viewed by many Jews as anti-Semitic and is taken to mean a call for the eradication of Israel. It is a call for the eradication of Israel, because Israel is a violent fascist settler colonial white supremacist
an abstract concept.
It is not a call for the eradication of any Jews anywhere. Sky News saw graffiti on the route of the protest comparing what is happening in Gaza with the Holocaust, although it is not known if this was made by anyone on the march. Just annoying narc behavior here. What else we got? Government Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. Hard to say. I much prefer saying Michael Gove, Secretary of State for Leveling Up, which is his title, was also seen in footage being mobbed by pro-Palestinian demonstrators at Victoria Station. So if people want to track down that video separately, it's very entertaining because Michael Gove has an awful haunted baby face and he's trying to keep us cool while several dozen protesters shout shame and force him to run away like a scared child.
If you want to know what Michael Gove looks like and you're not from the UK and you don't want to be bothered typing his full name into Google, just type POB, like P-O-B, and you will see what Michael Gove looks like. But yeah, there's also like a related thing to this that I saw earlier, which was like some loser Ukraine flag in bio like account on Twitter who said something along the lines of, "That's a really anti-Semitic placard you're carrying," and the placard was like Joe Biden done up as a demon. And he had like various like guys on a string. I think one of them
famously
was
Jewish Joe Biden.
Right, exactly, literally famously
saw that.
Jewish Joe Biden. Yeah, and he had like maybe Netanyahu on a string, and then also like I think Keir Starmer and
Right. Okay.
Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman. So it's like, what are you saying? Are you saying that this white Protestant man has a fucking, you know what I mean, he's controlling the Jewish and the racialized other leaders of the world? Is that what that's what you're saying is anti-Semitic? Okay, interesting. And then the Met Police in the
I gotta pull you up there, Jack. Listen now. Hey, whoa, Joe Biden is not Protestant.
Oh, is he not? Oh, he's Catholic.
Very proud of his Irish heritage.
Mm-hmm.
This is true. This is true. Sorry, that's my bad. Catholic. And in the thread, right, the Met Police had literally tweeted, "This woman is now under investigation." So this is how they're also using the sort of like, this is the trickle down of policing, right, from the press. It's literally like trickle down economics, but make it turning everybody into a fucking cop, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's all this deputized policing, right? Yeah, so I think I don't need to read more from the article. There, like I say, several examples of little things that we can kind of pick at. But like the thing that I think is really interesting is the subject of the article is that the Met Police have released photos and are looking for people who've done bad things, who are very naughty, who we need your help finding. And they've included several pictures of pro-Palestinian protesters. And the Met Police have also released various images of Fash who have done really heinous shit, including, you know, assaulting the cops, including being like carrying weaponry in the streets, all of this shit. There was a guy who was photographed like lifting up his shirt to show a swastika tattoo. Not here, you know, comparing Israel to the Nazis, but just because he's got a swastika tattoo because he's a Nazi.
So, no, I got this just for today.
Yeah. It says the bot, the yeah, like, you know, they've released a bunch of these photos as well, and they are not in the article. And so this is, you know, a part of what I'm talking about with this kind of cycle of appealing to the reactionary faction of the working class and creating a constant and relentless like reflection of this narrative. And this, you know, I keep on coming back to this idea because this is something that that actually, like, my brother, when I was like having a political conversation with him like some years ago now, he said to me that like he thinks that the media reflects what people think, and that we have to appreciate that like a lot of the time it's just like amplifying what the public actually thinks, rather than like trying to control or like suggest opinions to the public. And there's not really like an explanation of like reporting like this in that analysis of the media, you know, like showing only the photos that have been released of pro-Palestinian protesters and none of the right-wing ones. Even though the article does talk about right-wing violence, it doesn't show any of the protesters or any of the counter protesters who have been like, pictures have been released for identification, right? This is nothing to do with like the reflecting public opinion, you know. This is fully like the police are asking people to help identify, you know. And this is, you know, this is an interesting thing as well, because like the people who are the Sky News audience are probably better placed to help identify the Fash people if you put the pictures out to them, because they probably know him.
Yep, they'll be like, "Oh shit, that guy did my driveway last week. What the hell?"
Yeah, exactly. But they're going to see a blurry photo of a brown guy in a kafir, and they're going to be like, "Well, that's every Muslim I've ever seen. I think I should dob them all in." You know,
this is it, and it's like you can, you know, as much as you like, I don't know. I guess like it really fucking sucks because there is just so much of this. And it's like, how do you directly combat it, right? How do you directly like actually like do something about this? How do we like stop the press from having so much power? Something that I have taken a lot of hope from really in reality, because it sounds quite scary in general, right? In general, like 2,000 fascists descending on London sounds quite scary. Just in general, it's like that's quite a lot of people. You know, they're coming down to London, they're going to wreak havoc, it's going to be awful. And they did do that. But again, on the flip side, despite this like overwhelming messaging, despite this overwhelming attempt at mobilization, not just from their leaders, but also from the press, also from literal people in government like Suella Braverman, they still only managed to get 2,000 people down. And this is quite possibly like one of the biggest sort of mobilizing things that the fascists have used in a long time in this country. You know what I mean? It's like this is a one-time thing where everything that they hate, is like, you know, being sort of blasted at them in the media, like people having empathy and care for brown people in a different country that we're currently involved in helping bomb.
On Armistice Day, like a unique opportunity. Now, the great hope to take from that is that they only got 2,000 badly organized idiots, right? You absolutely,
know what I mean?
yeah. I think it's conspiratorial to ask about the intention of articles like this, but it's very worthwhile materialist and like Chomskyist analysis, right, to talk about what the function is of articles like this, right? Because it has been put together with intention. There have been really, really conscious decisions here, and yes, there is like very provable like fucking collusion between like all these journos who know each other, who know the Met Police Commissioner, who know the Tory ministers, and all this shit. But it's not really worth our while to chase it down in that regard, right? It's better to look at it, I think, ideologically, and so like. When you're saying that about the 2,000 fascists showing up, right? The article also captions one of the videos of the Solidarity demo saying thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters descend on London. Now there were 1 million, right?
Yes,
there were
literally 1 million.
The largest protest in 20 fucking years, and like it's possible it will get bigger in coming weeks. And like you say, you know, then the fascists only got 2,000 in. So it's like, what is the point, again, when they are speaking to this reactionary faction and they are directly like working to mobilize them? What's the point of playing with the numbers in that way? Well, it's because fascists are cowards and they're easily demoralized. When they know that they are going to lose a fight, they fuck off. And this is, again, provable because literally yesterday, like they fought the police, who were a much smaller number than the protesters. And then when the protesters were there, they fucked off because they were massively, massively outnumbered, and they would have gotten completely cumstered and dumpstered. So like in telling their readers or whatever, you know, their audience, that there were thousands of Palestinian protesters and there were thousands of far-right protesters, right? They're making up this idea that there's a sort of like evenly matched thing that could be tipped either way. You know, it's worth you showing up to defend the cenotaph and the king and get country back and all that, because if you do that, right, you might be the one who tips the balance. And that is the function. And I'm saying, you know, it's not the intention in the sense that it's not like necessarily one person thinking I'm going to manipulate it this way and cause this result, but it's definitely the function. It's definitely literally what is going to result out of it. And we can see that that's the case because they literally did that this week. They fearmongered that the cenotaph was going to get nebulously harmed in some way. Someone was going to, I don't know, rope the cenotaph or something.
Yeah.
And
draw a willy on it. Yeah,
drawing a pro-Palestinian cock and balls on the cenotaph. and so you know, these fascists showed up to try and defend it and also attack marginalized people.
Yeah, I do also want to echo your partner in the chat as well. Nat is saying that like they're also trying to scare people away from attending, scare people from speaking up, and this goes hand in hand with the other stuff that's been going on in terms of there have been talks now about trying to expand police powers again. These things have been spoken about in Parliament, and also you know, the publishing of these instances where people have actually lost their jobs for holding a sign at a rally or something like that, and people have lost their jobs for speaking out against Palestine for Palestine just at work, and these kinds of things all conglomerate into that that one intended function of like, don't come to the protest. It's really dangerous and you can get like arrested and that's really bad, you know. And don't get me wrong, it does happen. But
in Melbourne, one of the guys leading the chants, a Palestinian business owner, Harsh, who runs a burger place in Caulfield called Burgatory. And he's been the one leading the from the river to the sea chants and stuff like that. He's had his business firebombed, you know, like was literally like targeted because he is a Palestinian person that is like very vocal, and he's like a local icon, you know. He's like a loud guy, everyone knows him around Caulfield and stuff. And yeah, and like that's the thing, right? It's like, you know, and it's like it is ridiculous because it was like the day after a rally or something like that. And you know, all the newspaper stories and all this kind of stuff like that, at first none of them mentioned anything about, you know, him being Palestinian and being at the rallies and all these kind of things like that. It was just like, oh, there was a fire overnight. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I know it's like you got to be cautious before you say anything or anything like that, but they were like, at this point the fire department had said like, this is arson, you know, like all this kind of stuff, like this is a planned thing.
They're just quite clearly saying like, any of you could suffer as a result of attending, you know.
Like there are these like very tangible things that, you know, like could happen to you, sort of thing like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's like, yeah, I think there's like this, like I know there is like this kind of like McCarthyist kind of thing going on and stuff like that, where it's like that, like hunting down and like, you know, like exposing people for, you know, whatever. There's a couple groups like that over here at the moment. Actually, yeah, there's one in particular that I've just found out recently. There's one super active kind of any critic of Israel or whatever like that. They're trying to blow them up on Twitter and all this kind of stuff like that. And it's like one of the main people, one of the behind it, I'm not going to go into names or whatever like that, is like constantly quoted in articles and newspapers, on TV, interviewed, all this kind of stuff like that, and has like a history of doing some pretty shady stuff, and is like married to the guy that runs like some of New Zealand's biggest news orgs and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, well, okay, this is why we get this, you know, this one side of things pushing, you know, these like stories or whatever like that. And it's like why they're running kind of defamation pieces and all this kind of stuff like that. So it's like no wonder that there's just like these average people that, you know, like probably swing more right than they realize or whatever like that. And they have these ideas or all this kind of stuff like that. It's like, it's literally like, you know, entangled into our media landscape over here. But yeah, sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent, but yeah.
No, I think it's really worthwhile. I think it's really important to point at like also like the disproportionate violence that's also like a tiny minority of political action, but a disproportionate violence that like the far right will deploy and like these counter-revolutionaries will deploy, right? Because what we're seeing right now is revolutionary. It is like a ton of fucking people getting out to show international solidarity, to show that they care about Palestinian lives, to call for an end to the occupation, and like that's revolutionary. And that like, yeah, there's a real fucking rearrangement of social conditions if the Israeli occupation could be ended, and like to maintain this sort of illusion of democracy, this idea that like we live under a system that listens to us. We need to the ruling class has to like in some sense respond to what the people want, right? And if they can present the idea that the people don't want this thing that they're protesting a fucking million people march for, that there are enough people who think the other thing, then they can get away with like claiming that the democracy is just full of reactionary idiots, right?
Yeah.
Like if they can tell us that like the democracy is working fine, it's just that your neighbors are cunts, right? Like then we'll all believe that like we live under a democracy. Whereas and this is again is the function of saying there are thousands of Palestinian protesters and thousands of fash, is like trying to create this idea that things are evenly balanced. But like the you know, a huge tipping point comes when like people see that like the voice of the people is speaking out again and again and again and just not being heard. Like that's the point at which like shit goes really, really sideways for the ruling class. And I think like this has them really scared, or they wouldn't be acting so desperate.
The democracy point is a really good one because, again, that's what I was talking about before. That goes into the imperialist line. Like, you know, if you know, the media is so intent on talking about how all these other scary brown countries aren't actually democracies, you know, like very famously, like talking about like the quote unquote dictator Fidel Castro, whereas when you look at like Cuba's actual democratic election system, it's absurdly more democratic than ours, or anything that we could is completely different. You know, and that goes for, you know, any other scary country. So yeah, like what you're saying is absolutely right. It's like, don't worry about it. We live in truth and freedom and democracy, and we're the good countries, and all these other scary brown countries, you know, that you should be afraid of them. And also, you know, these guys, your neighbors, they love those scary brown countries. Like, look at them. They're all waving this scary flag that you've never seen before.
Right, absolutely.
So,
and I just think that like this is where we're going to clash into something really interesting very soon, because like these mass protests are ongoing and they're not going to stop. And there's some point at which like the complete lack of response by supposedly like democratic elected representatives, like I just think we should always bring this back to a revolutionary like perspective. And I think that like this is an interesting moment for a couple of reasons, because like they're really in danger of like losing their illusion of like representing people's opinions in a democratic fashion,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And like if people start seeing that like they're not being listened to, then they'll want to express what they believe in more, right? So it will drive like a general uptick in protest in general. When, you know, Tim brought up the Russian Revolution earlier and the point at which the soldiers joined in, there was a lot of like, you know, conscious organizing and spreading of class consciousness within the army at that point. And it is something that like nation states have like worked really consciously and hard against ever since, because they're fucking terrified of it happening again. But at the same time, there were also just like mass strikes going on and mass protests all the time. And the soldiers simply were aware of that and simply just like saw that stuff, and it kicked off the spread of class consciousness in the army because they just saw it, right? There's a point at which like protest feeds more protest, feeds more protest, feeds more protest, and people seeing themselves not get listened to and these demands not getting met, it doesn't demoralize them, and it doesn't like tell them that they should stop it. It just exposes the repeated contradiction of like capitalist democracy, that like fundamentally like the capitalists are the ones who are in charge of society, not the people. And so capitalist democracy is a contradiction in terms.
Every single protest I've been to so far, and granted I'm biased because I hang around with the coolest motherfuckers in this city, but every single protest I've been to, there's been a broader conversation about you know, the neoliberal capitalist world that we live in, and just how fascism serves it, and how working class you know, people need to come together and unite in order to be able to make a change. Like, this is like a huge thing. It's not just something that's happening in conversations in passing when people are like marching and stuff. It's like, you know, happening with the speakers. The speakers at these protests are saying these things, and people are cheering them. People are understanding them. You know, it's not just some sort of like feigned whatever. People are getting radicalized. You know, they're now fraternizing with people who are actively engaging in sabotage of weapons factories, or blockades of weapons factories, or even more simple actions. And you know, this is just, it's like you say, it's gonna snowball to a point.
I don't necessarily just want to talk about like more numbers. I don't want to just talk about like line go up, like radicalization in terms of like more people join the protest and there's a bigger protest. I want to talk about it in terms of dual power, because like when people are protesting this much and they see that their voice is completely unheard and ignored by the politicians, right, there just comes a point where like people start asking, well, can we just meet our needs directly? Like, can, you know, in the same way that we are sabotaging this thing and stopping this gala from happening, or stopping this boat from leaving this port or whatever, or blowing up this pipeline, can we also like make it so that we have food for ourselves? Can we also make it so that like anyone who needs a house is in a house and stuff like this? Like, this is a point at which like when people see that they don't live in a democracy in really real terms, when they see that the press is trying to tell them what their opinions are and tell them what their neighbors' opinions are, and they know that their neighbors' opinions aren't those things. They see the press as completely fucking shallow and like captured and controlled by capitalist interests. When they see the politicians ignoring them, they see that like if someone is going to make society the shape that people demand, it's going to have to be the people, right? And this is a point at which like a lot of these systems like can fall apart. I'm not saying this as like die-hard prediction. I'm saying there is a completely intractable situation where like this genocide is ongoing, the occupation is ongoing, and the Western governments are completely endorsing it. And so like it is breaking, like it's just breaking the trust in the police, the trust in the press, the trust in democracy, because people are saying we have to fucking stop this. And the clear fact of the matter that they don't want to, that they want to aid it and that they support it, is bearing out, right? And so this is like when people use the Marxist language of like contradictions sharpening. The contradictions are right fucking here, like they're in front of everyone's eyes, and they're so apparent.
Anyone who has been to a protest that is like, so in Manchester, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we had 20,000 people. And then last week, we also had, I think, around 14,000, 15,000, someone saying. People are saying that it was also 20,000. But I don't know, I'm bad with numbers. But the long and short of it, if you've been to a protest which has these like vast amounts of people, something that you can observe, and it's easy to observe because you're doing this slow march. It normally takes over 2 hours. In order to get from A to B, and unless you're going to duck out early or whatever. And what you can observe, and I've observed it happening multiple times now, is that it tends to act like a kind of singular amorphous blob, right? But amorphous is not the right word because it's cohesive. Like the messaging is cohesive. You will see random people start to pick up chants, right? The same chants that they've been hearing. Random people will just start, even if they don't have a megaphone. If it's a bit quiet, people will just start calling out. And, you know, people will start talking to people and like, you know, like getting really emotional and saying it's fucked that this is happening. It's fucked. You know, I've seen loads of that.
It's acephalous. It's not led by anyone in particular.
Exactly. You can see the various blocks. You could see like the queer block. You could see the union block. You could see like the Stop the War Coalition block, all these various blocks, but they're part of a bigger whole. And it is actually been, and I haven't been using it as a ground to recruit for the tenants union because that would be a little unethical. But I've made connections there, and I've gotten speaking to people who found out that I organized with the tenants union, and they've gone, I've been meaning to join that, right? I've been meaning to join that, and this has become a catalyst for them to join.
And that they are joining into a system of mutual aid and an organizational structure that like provide them with other stuff. Exactly. And this is what I mean is like, I don't just want to talk about radicalization in terms of the number increases. I want to talk about like this as a moment that like okay, let's try it like this. There are a plausible, very small number of steps between like where we are right now and like dual power. Whether they're likely, like I don't think they're likely at all. But like, but there are a plausible set of steps, right? Which is like people are protesting like this. They see a complete like they have this complete like shattering of faith in like the police, the press, the politicians, right? And then they turn to structures, yeah, like the tenants union, like all these structures, and form these structures, and even form their own democracy, right? And that is the point at which there's a dual power, the point at which like the structures that are handling things, people's immediate needs, like a tenants union or like a food co-op or whatever, are joining into some kind of democratic process that's organized by the people and is like authentically democratic. That's the point at which there is a dual power of some kind, right? And again, like, you know, not to leave it unsaid, to just restate, like the point at which it's probably like very, very meaningful is the point at which like the military is no longer a threat to the people, because like there is just the eternal threat of fucking martial law because of the beautiful nature of the state. But yeah, these protests could drive that I don't know. It's a low chance. It's a low chance. Let's be real.
I think at the very least, what we're finding is people are becoming politicized in a way that is outside of electoral politics. That's what we're seeing at least. And that is good on its own. Because people are seeing, like, overwhelmingly at these marches, people are going, Keir Starmer, shame on you. Rishi Sunak, shame on you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Exactly. And then you got like this insufferable discourse that's like currently going around Twitter, which is like, you can't say that Biden's doing a wrong thing because I saw a trans person once and she would be sad if it wasn't for Biden, because if it wasn't for Biden, we definitely have Trump. There's only two choices: it's Biden or Trump. And it's just like, shut up.
It's the worst. It's the most insufferable shit.
This is the closer corollary to the thing that you were saying earlier, Tim, about like, don't assume, but also that guy is my cousin, is like having to block someone who like is dating someone who's dating someone who's dating someone I'm dating because like they're fucking doing like spineless liberal genocide denial, like fucking awful. It's somewhere between that, right? It's them getting this consciousness and stepping outside of electoral politics. It's somewhere between that and my ideal scenario. But the point is, like, it's a revolutionary direction is what's happening. Like,
absolutely, yes.
This should not be written off by anyone as like a faraway thing or any kind of trivial thing. This is part of a revolutionary project. Like, this is the momentum that this is driving is unbelievable.
Well, I think because here's the thing, is that we're kind of lucky that this is happening now, and we're not in the times of the Iraq war, because we have like a much broader amount of people to reach on social media, right? Most people who've discovered our show, have discovered through, a soul-crushing internet addiction, right? Sorry, everyone listening. Sorry, our beloved patrons, but it's true.
This is literally why we call the top tier sickos. You are sickos. And you know it.
Yes, you need help. But and only giving money to our show can help you. But literally, like to sort of like talk about it in a more materialist manner. More and more people have access to smartphones now, right? More and more people have access to 4G networks, the internet and stuff, and so people are able to get radicalized by consuming this content that is going to be ultimately related, because the liberation of Palestine is an ultimately left-wing cause. It's based in materialism. It's based in anti-imperialism. These are the most, very, very direct and important facets of anti-capitalism, right? So when you combine that and you get this other stuff, the algorithm is going to start working in our favor. Maybe not entirely, but it's going to certainly be driving people to, like, when people are trying to understand anti-colonialism, all of a sudden they'll be awoken to, oh, hang on a minute, there's this genocide that's going on in Sudan. There's this genocide that's going on in the Congo, right?
And then it's time to drop the fucking the nuclear red pill of the eternal genocide of the working class by the ruling class, and then they're like, oh shit,
exactly.
So we have reached the last 10 minutes of the show already without marking out any time for a Q&A, and I don't think we should bother with that.
Chat. There's no questions.
You're all sickos.
We're correct about everything, and we've given you all the information
these takes
you need.
Have been exactly correct, so you don't get to ask anything. But I do actually have an idea for homework, which is to, in the manner we've been talking about today, try and think about the function of news when you see it, especially news that's about protests, right? Have a read through, look at all the little bits, right? We've been looking at not just the stuff in the article, but the headline. We've been looking at the captions on it. We've been talking about what their sources are and their, like, what information is left out, right? If you want to refresh on the propaganda model, the 5 filters are access, ownership, flack, advertising, and fear, or anti-communist, Islamophobic, or all these drives of fear. Have a look at some news media about protests and have a think about what the function is, what is achieved by what they're doing. So with that said, I think the only other thing is to say that the show is supported by our patrons, patreon.com. /red_planet. I'm gonna keep asking everything like a question.
Just keep that intonation going up at the end, the cadence.
I think the URL is
is patreon.com/red_planet.
Whoa, okay, cool.
Yeah, you can start with you can start your support for Red Planet with our lowest tier is Sprite mode, which is $3.50 per month in New Zealand dollars, $2 American, and probably about £2, right? Like
He's right.
Bang
He's
on.
right.
Yeah,
He should say it.
So get started with your support for Red Planet by becoming a Sprite. The benefits include the sacred and forbidden knowledge that you are helping the Red Planet team, early access to VODs, access to the Red Planet Discord, and supporting us. But what's the next tier, Sophie? What's up from the Sprite mode?
I can tell you all about that. If you imagine a Sprite getting larger and more powerful, like evolving like a Pokemon, basically, right? Obviously, the thing that's going to happen is that Sprite is going to turn into a Goblin, and that's why our second tier is called Goblin mode. It's £8.50, or it's $10 US, and it's 12 New Zealand dollars. Oh, you're muted.
$17.50 a
17,
month.
that's so much. All right. Anyway, more importantly, everyone loves a goblin. We all get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by going goblin mode with everything from Sprite mode, and a cool pack of Red Planet stickers for you to stick in legal places and only places exactly like that. But also access to exclusive Red Planet Discord hangouts. So as well as getting into the Discord, you'll also be able to come hang out with us while we watch some stuff and just chill. It's kind of like the stream. It's more chill than the stream, really. Like, we're obviously here on the stream, on the pod, whatever. We are like filling all the dead air. It's very high pressure for us to do this. In the hangouts, we'll watch something and occasionally we'll pause it and
talk for about 2 hours and then play the movie again.
And so if you are a goblin or higher, you can come and get higher and watch Zeitgeist on Saturday, November 18th at 9 p.m. UK time, 4 p.m. EST in the Discord with us. Yeah, we're going to be watching Zeitgeist because we figured it'd be a laugh. Because Mule and I watched it last time we hung out, and it was a laugh.
It was a laugh.
Mule, what Goblin is just one of the tiers that would have access to that Discord hangout. What's the next one?
Well, when a goblin evolves, we all know that a goblin becomes a beast, whether that beast is some kind of Uruk-hai or what's that one thing from Dungeons and Dragons that's like a bug? It's called
Bugbear.
Bugbear, one of them, amazing that you got what that was, Sophie.
One way or another, the point is the goblin will become sexier. So
it will become, true, it will become more fuckable, and that's why we call this next tier the Beast mode. Holy shit, are you actually going to go Beast mode? Well, then, we can offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers and pin badges. Yeah, pin badges. Wear your excellent new pin badge, Red Planet pin badge, literally everywhere. It's completely cool and good to do. But there's one final tier. We alluded to this. We don't like to talk about these people in the middle of the show. You know what I mean? It can be a little bit
bad for them. Like, you give them too much attention and they get, it's
daunting. It's daunting for a lot of people to acknowledge that these kinds of people exist. But Tim, let's give them what they want. Let's give them what they want.
We'll give those sickos what they want. We have sicko mode, which is I think it's $100, about £100.
It's £85.
£85. Okay, cool. And New Zealand dollars, it is $172 a month. So if you support us this much, we can only really reasonably offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers, plus a very special thank you message at the end of every stream. So that's the stickers, the pins, the Discord access, the Hangouts, all that stuff. And then, the on-air thank you, which looks like this, Sophie.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you so much to JBP, Nerylon, Starfire, Queen Pib, Cassie Tastrophe, and Risk Inverse. You're sickos!
Yeah!
Everyone knows it.
Absolutely disgustingly sick.
But Tim, one more thing. I want to know where the sickest of sickos, the Tim heads, I'm sorry. There is not. There is 2 more things.
Yeah.
I've just been told by our producer that I forgot to mention the merch, and that is a grave mistake because actually, we are adding hoodies to the merch line now. We're gonna get hoodies that are gonna have the Red Planet logo on the front and the Queer Existence is Resistance design on the back. As well as that, you can get it as a t-shirt, or you can get it as a tote bag at mercenarycreative.com. And yeah, we'll hopefully have more merch in our Red Planet range sometime soon. But now, Tim, I have a question for you, and it's about the sickest of sickos, the Tim heads. Where can we find more, Tim?
Well, you can find me you can find me here or on YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or you can find me over on Twitter and Blue Sky as Dread Conquest. Yeah, I don't have much plans to do any streaming outside of Red Planet at the moment, just super hectic with work and stuff. But if you do want to catch some sicko streams, where can we find more about our friend DJ Mule?
Whoa, Tim, what a segue. And you're right, because I'm actually coming back to streaming this week because I've been working very hard on the Red Planet Zad documentary. Had to take a lot of time off for that in particular, but that's basically coming to an end now, and I'm going to be streaming more regularly this month, including a very, very special acoustic live set. I'm going to be playing some songs. I'm going to be playing some songs from the likes of Alice in Chains, Massive Attack, the Alan Parsons Project, maybe a little bit of Woody Guthrie. I haven't really decided yet if I'm going to learn that. Probably will. I probably will. So yeah, that's a very exciting stream that you got to look forward to. Also, I got loads of other links. linktree.ee/DJMUEL. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on YouTube, and also, the big old Twitch.tv. So don't forget, that's what that is. And also, you shouldn't forget where you can find Sophie from, and she's going to tell us where that is.
I will. But first, I'm going to tell you where we can find Kira, our currently absent co-host, because she's away doing a based thing. You can find her right now at a protest, but I don't know which one, so I can't really help you there. But you can find her at linktree.ee/Kira chats. All her links are there. All the good ones, all the better ones, they're all there. linktree.ee/Kira chats. Similarly, you can find all my links at linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. I'm on Twitter, Twitch, Tumblr, Blue Sky, YouTube, Instagram. I have some sort of crippling, awful social media addiction that I've managed to turn into a successful job. Good for me, ? Right. Is that all? I don't know. If you enjoyed this episode specifically and the kind of discussion we were having about the media and politics and theory and how we know stuff and that's very much what my work is about. So check me out on YouTube at Sophie from Mars, and check me out on patreon.com/Sophie from Mars, where there's my writing about this kind of stuff frequently. And that's all about the host. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next week.
All right.
Bye. See you next week. Whoa, Bye. Look at them fingers. Oh, there they go.